Chapter 481. It had been hundreds of years since the ancestors of the tribe came here. They had fought for a piece of land and lived here until now. It had been passed down from one generation to the next. They knew every detail of the houses and the cultivation of the fields. Every place had a history and memory. When they heard that they were going to pack up and leave, the people in the tribe were shocked. They didn't know how to react and just followed their leader's orders. When they came back to their senses, they started talking. When they heard that the nobles from the 6 tribes were going to attack their tribe, they were furious. Some of the warriors wanted to fight them, but Duo Kong heard them and beat them up. You think we're afraid? Bullshit. Why would we Yin Jiao be afraid of those arrogant slave masters? The reason we're leaving is because we're going back, Duo Kong said loudly. The people who were packing up stopped in their tracks. Go back. Go back where? What did their leader mean? The warrior who was beaten up by Duo Kong forgot to get up and asked, Leader, are we right here? Where are we going? We're going back to where our ancestors came from. Duo Kong left after saying that. He still had to go down the mountain to inspect other places. Because of the departure, the whole tribe was a little anxious. In order to prevent the energetic warriors from making trouble because they didn't get to hunt, he had to calm them down. The bruised warrior on the ground looked at Duo Kang's back as he left. He dug at the dry ground and thought about Duo Kang's words. We're going back to where our ancestors came from. Where our ancestors came from. Shaoxian. He heard that Shaoxian came from there too. Did that mean they were going to the legendary birthplace of the Yinjiao tribe? Xiangchun and the others had just returned to the tribe. Initially, they were disheartened by the fact that the sea had yet to freeze. After hearing the bad rumors about the Flaming Horn tribe, they wanted to fight it out with these people. They didn't expect things to turn out this way. The Yinjiao people were sick. Xiangchun had heard about this from his father a long time ago. They just didn't talk about it. If other people said that the Yinjiao people were sick, he would definitely scold them back. You're the one who's sick. Your entire tribe is sick. However, that was the truth of the matter. After scolding him, Xiangchun began to wonder when he would recover from his illness. But now the opportunity had come. Although he didn't know what the shamaness was thinking, since the shamaness and the chief had decided to leave, he would do the same. What about the duck shed? The person taking care of the ducks was reluctant to let them go. He ran over and asked Shaoxian, just leave them there. Leave the duck shed to them. In the future, if they want to leave, they can leave. If they want to stay here, then let them stay. These ducks were too ordinary, and the people in the tribe didn't care for them. It was troublesome to bring them along. Should they kill them and roast them? He might as well hunt a few ferocious beasts to satisfy himself. Those duck eggs were the protection fee for these ducks. How many eggs did we pick up today? What should we do? The man asked again. Cook them and bring them along. Where's the green duck? The man asked expectantly. Shaoxian looked at the fat duck that was swimming in the river with a flock of green feathers. Shaoxian couldn't wait for these green eggs. However, the duck eggs had helped the Yinjiao before, so Shaoxian didn't kill them. Don't worry about it. The copper cauldron had already been smelted into other copper products. There were pots and kettles, which were distributed to the tribe's meritorious members. They couldn't bear to throw them away and planned to keep them with them. The salt had been successfully refined. Most of it was distributed to the people in the tribe, while the shamaness kept the rest. The grains and herbs were also distributed within a day. The people in the tribe were so busy that they didn't have time to think about anything else, let alone feel sad. Shaoxian had experienced a big migration before. This was the second one, but the situation was slightly different. This time, there were many people who were hostile towards them. Perhaps it wouldn't be as smooth as the first one. Shaoxian and Zheng Luo had discussed the migration route. Xiangqian's route could no longer be used. Someone must have seen the Yinjiao on that route. Perhaps someone had already set up an ambush, waiting for the Yinjiao to come knocking on their door. That route would also pass by several cities. They could use it in the past because it was convenient for them to resupply. Now they had to avoid it. In comparison, Shaoxian's route was much safer because it avoided places with many people. Perhaps there were dangers in the forest, but that route was the shortest. Plus, there were so many people. If they encountered a fierce beast, everyone could work together to fend it off. Let's go with this one. Zheng Luo's finger tapped on Xiao Xian's map. First, send someone to scout out the situation in the forest. Clear the path. That night, when most of the people in the tribe couldn't sleep, Xiao Xian had a dream. He dreamed of the first shaman of the tribe. He couldn't see the shaman's face clearly, only a blurry figure. But Xiao Xian had a special feeling that he was sure of this person's identity. The legendary first shaman of the Yinjiao tribe, and the original owner of the 6 bone ornaments. In Xiao Xian's dream, he saw the shaman walking down a long and narrow path, step by step, walking into the distance. That path was familiar. The surroundings were dark, and there was the sound of flowing water. Beside him, there were some vague, large figures moving slowly like giant beasts in the sea. His eyes flew open. Xiao Xian was still in a daze, but the scene in the dream was still vivid. Every detail was crystal clear, except for that blurry figure. Outside the window, it was already dawn. Light could be seen through the wooden window. Getting up, Xiao Xian quickly rinsed his mouth with cold water, wiped his face, and ran to find the shaman without eating breakfast. Early in the morning, the shaman wasn't in the house. She stood by the fire pit, staring blankly at it. In the past night, the shaman didn't sleep at all. She stood by the fire pit for the whole night. Although her face was calm, there were obvious dark circles under her eyes. Under her drooping eyelids, her eyes were bloodshot. Perhaps the shaman wasn't as calm as she looked. After all, the tribe's migration was a big deal. She and the chief were under a lot of pressure to make this decision. Seeing Xiao Xian, the shaman asked, "What's the hurry?" "There's something I don't understand," said Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian told her about his dream last night. He didn't know if it was a hint from the ancestors or if he was overthinking it. After hearing Xiao Xian's story, the shaman's listless eyes lit up. She squinted slightly, and the wrinkles on her face deepened. "That's the path. It's the path the ancestors showed us. Maybe when we get there, it'll turn into what you saw. Then the path will be formed," said the shaman with certainty. She believed the ancestors wouldn't lie to them. "But don't worry, it's definitely a hint from the ancestors." But before Xiao Xian could finish, the shaman raised her hand to stop Xiao Xian. "You have to believe in the ancestors." "I do," said Xiao Xian helplessly. "Then it's fine. All we need to do is bring the tribesmen there." After hearing Xiao Xian's words, the shaman felt much better. She decided to talk to Zheng Luo. Zheng Luo was probably under a lot of pressure, so he didn't sleep at all. Early in the morning, she heard Zheng Luo lecturing the tribesmen. Seeing the shaman leave quickly, Xiao Xian scratched his head. He didn't think he'd encounter the same situation as last time. In his dream, he didn't encounter the sound of flowing water or the huge figures. 2 days later, the tribe gathered. The scouting team had returned. They could walk through the forest, but there were puddles in some places. They had to be careful. On the mountain, the fire pit was still there, but without the Yinjiao tribesmen, the fire pit had lost its purpose. The house was still there, but no one lived there. It was empty and lonely. In the fields, some weeds had sprouted. The crops hadn't been planted, so the tribesmen had to give up on this opportunity and save the seeds. In a man-made river that was dug around the mountain, ducks of different colors and sizes were swimming in it. The temperature was rising quickly. The water was already warm. The ducks were lively after a harsh winter. Are we really leaving these for the Taiha people? Duo Kong couldn't bear to leave them. But after they left, this place would be ownerless. They didn't want to give it to anyone else, so they could only give it to the Taiha tribe. "They're lucky. I hope they don't eat all the ducks," said someone who used to live near the duck shed. "I don't care about the others, but I can't bear to leave those green ducks behind." The duck shed keeper kept looking back. The long line of people left. The fat duck in the river looked at them quietly. It was confused, but it had no intention of following them. It only watched as the last person in the line crossed the bridge before turning back to swim with the other ducklings. When the line passed by the Taiha tribe, Xiao Xian saw a group of people waiting there. Most of them were from the hunting team. They were familiar with each other, including Quan Bai and the others who stayed with the Yinjiao tribe for a long time when they planted the 1,000 grain gold. They were here to send them off. This was the last time they saw each other. Whether it was the Yinjiao people or the Taiha people, they were all reluctant to part. Take these with you. The Taiha chief took out 2 large cloth bags. They were filled with the herbs they'd rushed to produce in the past 2 days. Take care. Thank you, take care. Zheng Luo patted the Taiha chief's shoulder. Right, don't eat those green ducks over there. Take care of them. You'll be rewarded. Xiao Xian should have told you, right? Asked Zheng Luo. I know. Don't worry, said the Taiha chief. Why, that sounds so awkward. They didn't hesitate anymore. They gave the 2 sides a short time to leave. 2 old people knelt and cried. There were Yinjiao, people who had married into the Taiha tribe. There were also Taiha people who had married into the Yinjiao tribe. There hadn't been any intermarriage in recent years, but there were still some who were still alive. They wanted to leave with the Yinjiao, but they were already very old. They would only be a burden if they followed the team. The shaman raised his hand and patted them on the head. Stay! The line set off again, gradually leaving this place where they'd lived for hundreds of years. Zheng Luo looked back in the direction of the hill. The tall trees blocked his view. He looked back, his steps firm as he walked at the front of the line. Their ancestors said that one day, the Yinjiao people who left would return to their homeland. This was the day their generation met. Chapter 482. Roar. A mournful roar echoed through the forest. After the sound of metal clashing, the roar finally stopped, and the heavy breathing gradually calmed down. Xiao Xian pulled a leaf from the side and wiped the blood off his sword. The soldiers next to him went over to deal with the beast that had just been killed. They opened the kettle and poured the blood into it. If it was in the past, they would try their best to keep the animal skin intact after killing the prey. But now, they no longer needed that, and the animal skin would not be hoarded for trade. All they needed was food, and this ferocious beast had become the warriors' lunch. 7 or 8 people dealt with the beast at the same time. They removed the organs, cut off the meat, and left the skin and bones where they were. Duo Kong passed over a kettle filled with beast blood. Drink some. Xiao Xian waved his hand. No, I didn't use much. Give it to the other soldiers. Duo Kong grinned and didn't say much. He took a gulp and passed it to the others. The slightly viscous liquid with a strong smell of blood flowed down his esophagus and into his stomach. The energy that he had spent in the morning was gradually replenished, and he felt a little warm. Sweat seeped out of his pores. Duo Kong pulled a few tender leaves from the side and rubbed his hands to get rid of the coagulated blood clots on his hands. It's been 2 days, and we haven't met anyone chasing after us. Duo Kong looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian to give him some information. He saw Xiao Xian playing with a straw rope in the morning. Xiao Xian wouldn't be so bored as to play with a straw rope at a time like this. He must be doing some divination. Duo Kong had been leading the team to guard their surroundings, so he didn't have time to ask. Now that he finally had the chance, he came over to ask. We'll meet them soon. Not everyone thinks we'll go back the way we came, and not everyone will choose to ambush us. Some will take the initiative to attack. Maybe someone can predict our route, Xiao Xian said. They can even predict our route? Duo Kong was shocked. He didn't believe it, but thinking about the Yi family, it was possible. Although the Yi family had a lot of useless people, there are still some capable people. What are your plans? Duo Kong asked again. Let's just continue on our way. By the way, have you guys finished the things I asked you to do? Xiao Xian asked. Before they set off, Xiao Xian assigned some tasks to the warriors who were a little more relaxed. With the elderly and children in tow, the journey would definitely not be as fast as when they were hunting, so naturally, some of them would be free. Xiao Xian gave them some time to help with some small tasks. I made a lot. They're all over there. Duo Kong pointed to a rattan basket not far away. That's good. You guys can leave first. I'll stay behind to set up this place. Xiao Xian walked over and opened the lid of the rattan basket. He was very satisfied with the items inside. Duo Kong thought of what Xiao Xian had done when they went to Amba City to trade and encountered the young master of Amba City who had sent people to kill them. He didn't ask any more questions. He called the other warriors who had finished dealing with the beasts to quickly pack up and continue on their way. Xiangchen saw that Xiao Xian was alone at the back and asked Duo Kong curiously, Elder, you're not leaving? Our elder has something to do. Duo Kong gestured for Xiang Chun to quickly return to the group. Xiang Chen's head was full of questions. He didn't go with Duo Kong to trade, so he didn't know what happened. Even if he heard about it from others, he didn't have a deep impression of it. He returned to the group and picked up his younger daughter, carried his wife on his back, and hung the other things around his neck or waist. Then, Xiang Chun, like the others, continued on their way. Soon, the place that was filled with the smell of blood quieted down. The humid and warm air carried the smell of blood. In the distance, the roars of beasts could be heard. Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. Through the cover of the leaves, he could see some flying figures flying back and forth. The scavenger birds couldn't wait any longer. The first one swooped down, broke through the leaves, and headed straight for the remains of the beast on the ground. Xiao Xian slashed it to the ground with his sword. After a few twitches, it died. The other scavenger birds saw this and turned in the air. They rested on the branches not far away and stared at Xiao Xian. More than 20 scavenger birds flew down and rested not far away, staring at Xiao Xian. There were even more in the sky. Xiao Xian was the only one in the area. If it had been someone less brave, they would have been scared. Xiao Xian ignored them. He busied himself around the remains of the beast for a while, slapping a few of the scavenger birds that wanted to attack him to the ground. When he was done, he left and continued to set up traps around the area. Xiao Xian planned to set up another trap. He had asked the soldiers to help him set up traps. There would definitely be pursuers behind him. Even if he couldn't rely on these traps to block all of them, he could at least cause them some damage and delay them. This would also slow down the pursuers. Seeing Xiao Xian leave the beast's corpse, the scavenger birds waiting on the branches rushed up. Many feathers fell as they fought. Because the Yinjiao team had just arrived, the large beast had already left the area. For the time being, there wouldn't be anything to fight with these scavenger birds for food. The scavenger birds pecked at the remains of the beast's flesh and blood. They blinked their gray eyelids and bit on the bloody meat strands. They were on guard against Xiao Xian. From time to time, they would spread their wings and extend their necks at Xiao Xian. They were trying to drive away Xiao Xian and prevent him from stealing their food. However, Xiao Xian didn't plan to pay any attention to them. He continued with his work. A greenish-gray vine that was thinner than a pinky finger was entwined in the inconspicuous grass. If someone familiar with the forest saw it, they would definitely be on guard. This was because this vine was not found in the vicinity. It was a vine that lived in the swamps. It was thin and tough. Sharp wooden thorns and polished stone needles were hidden by leaves. In less than half an hour, a basket of vines had been hidden nearby. By the time he was done, only skin and bones were left of the beast's corpse. Most of the meat had been cleaned up. The huge beast was now only a pile of skin, bones, and hard teeth. Xiao Xian stood up, glanced around the place, and then left. Taiha tribe, a group of Taiha warriors, chased away the sneaky people in the forest. They even killed 2 of them. How many waves has it been? Is it the 3rd wave or the 4th? A warrior asked. Good thing the Yinjiao people left quickly. Otherwise, it would be so annoying. In the past 2 days, they often encountered people loitering in the nearby forest, especially around the Yinjiao tribe. They had taken over Yinjiao's territory, so they naturally had to send people to guard it and chase away anyone who wanted to get close. Those people seemed to be small groups. They didn't dare to offend the Taiha people. When they saw that the Yinjiao tribe was almost empty, they gave up and went to look for traces of the Yinjiao people in the forest. Some people even wanted to threaten the Taiha people, but this was Taiha territory. They didn't manage to threaten anyone. Instead, they were dragged up the mountain to be used as fertilizer. The sun was setting. At dusk, a group of about 100 people followed the trail. After all, there were so many Yinjiao people. It was impossible for them to not leave any traces behind. For those who were familiar with the area, it was easy to distinguish them. They were the first group of people to catch up. After going to the vicinity of the Flaming Horns tribe to inquire, they didn't stop to follow the trail. They wanted to get some benefits before others. Although there were only about 100 people, they didn't plan to fight head-on. Instead, they planned to kidnap some people and use them as hostages. Then they could threaten the Yinjiao people with fire crystals and salt. They had used this method many times on other people. Compared to fighting head-on, it was much smarter. This time, they were full of confidence. "Beast carcasses. They passed by here not long ago," said one of them. They approached the carcasses. They wanted to judge the strength of the people who killed them from the carcasses. They also wanted to know the approximate time since the carcasses were killed. This would allow them to estimate the opponent's strength and the time it would take to catch up. However, when the people who went to check on the beast carcass poked at the beast bones, which had been pecked clean, a strange change occurred. Buzz, with a rapid, trembling sound, as if a chaotic switch had been pressed, the tranquil forest was suddenly filled with murderous intent. The large area of effect stone needles were like rain. Those who tried to dodge would accidentally trigger another round of traps. Every time they thought that they had finally dodged, they would be greeted with another round of attacks, round after round. The noose was like a big hand that suddenly emerged from the ground and tied up those who couldn't escape in time. Those who moved slowly were accidentally pierced by wood and stone needles. When all the chaos finally stopped, those who were still alive didn't dare to move. They looked around vigilantly. Their nerves were tense with every step they took. Some people on the ground were groaning. They were poisoned and trapped. Even if they survived, they couldn't continue to chase for the time being. Although there were only about 20 people who lost their ability to move, 8 of them were dead. The remaining 70 or so were only slightly injured. However, they didn't dare to chase at full speed like before. Fortunately, they were alert enough to dodge quickly. Otherwise, at least half of them would be lying here. "Boss, should we continue to chase?" A man's face was twisted as he pulled out a wooden thorn from his arm. It was obviously made of wood, but it was such a big threat. The poison on the thorn made his entire arm numb. He applied some medicine and felt better, but he didn't know if it would continue to work. If the poison was too strong, he didn't know if his arm would be crippled. The leader was also alarmed. They hadn't received any information before, so their understanding of the Yinjiao people was limited to strength and arrogance. They didn't expect to suffer such a big loss just as they were about to catch up. "Take the injured people away first. We won't chase for now," the leader said. "What if the fire crystals and salt are taken by others? Then let them take it first. I'd like to see what other methods the Yinjiao people will use to deal with those behind us." They were at a disadvantage this time because they didn't understand the Yinjiao people. They couldn't blindly chase after them. If they fell into the enemy's trap, only death would await them. After all, they had so few people. They wouldn't be able to get anything, but their own side would be wiped out. If they wanted to experiment, they should let others do it. Chapter 483. When the Flaming Horn tribesmen who were waiting for an ambush on the route that the Flaming Horn tribesmen often took were about to lose their patience. While some people were chasing after the trail in the forest, there was another group of people who took another route. The people in metal armor walked in a line. The people at the front were riding tall horses. These horses were of a carefully selected breed and had been well taken care of. They were very spirited. Their big hooves stomped on the ground, making pong 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 sounds. Even the stones on the road were easily crushed. The horses galloped together like rolling thunder. The people riding on the tall horses held bronze spears in their hands. The spears glowed with a cold light. Coupled with the cold face of the person holding the spear, the people passing by could feel a chill from afar. The coldest winter had passed, and the temperature had risen a lot. But when they saw these people, they still couldn't help but shiver and feel a chill down their backs. Because people often walked on this road, there were fewer weeds and no trees in the way. The ground was flat, making it convenient for carriages and horses. The tribe's trading teams often came and went on this road. However, the width of this road was limited. When the caravans passed by, they had to rearrange their formation. It was impossible for 2 teams to pass at the same time, unless one side avoided it and walked on the side with grass, rocks, and pits. In front of them was a traveling caravan from an unknown tribe. The people riding horses at the front of the caravan squeezed their horses' bellies, shook the spears in their hands, and rushed forward with a whoosh. The sharp spears pierced through the air, and the sound was like the whimpering of the cold wind, piercing the people in front of them. "Dodge! Dodge!" The people in the caravan shouted and drove the carriages and beasts to the side. The people also hurried to the side. They could only dodge when faced with such a group. Seeing this group, the people in the caravan felt a sense of fear. No matter how much courage they had, it would be completely extinguished when faced with such a group. Under such an attack, they could only dodge. The cold air hit them in the face. Before the spears reached them, the murderous aura was already there. If they didn't dodge, they would definitely face these people. They came too quickly. Because the caravan was in a hurry to dodge, a wooden cart piled with goods was almost overturned by a rock. Some goods fell to the ground, but the people in the caravan didn't care about the fallen goods. A young man in the group wanted to pick them up, but an elder grabbed his clothes and dragged him to the side. Rumble. The person on the horse had already arrived. The spear that was thrust out with a slightly cold air, brushing past the side of the young man who was being dragged by the elder. His exposed skin was scraped by the murderous air current, causing goosebumps to appear all over his body. The closer he got, the more he could feel how terrifying they were. This kind of aura, this kind of impact that wanted to sweep everything away, made the young man, who was struggling to pick up the dropped items, freeze like a stone. It seemed that if he moved even a little more, he would be smashed into pieces by this kind of aura. To these people who were rushing over on their horses, everything in their way, whether it was a person or an object, was their enemy. Anyone who stood in the way would be killed. The object was destroyed. The spear in the hands of the person at the front suddenly tilted downwards. The body of the spear shook along with the wrist of the person holding the spear, making a strange whining sound, like the low growl of a fierce beast before biting. Bang! The goods that fell on the ground were swept to the side by the spearhead. Because the spearhead was swung with too much force, it even had a tearing and destructive power. The linen cloth wrapped around the goods made a tearing sound, and the goods also scattered in the air, breaking into pieces of linen cloth and then drifting down. However, the people who were hiding at the side didn't dare to make a sound at this time. They didn't dare to check how many of the dropped goods were still in good condition, because once they got close, they would be mercilessly stabbed there. With that kind of aura and force, if a person bumped into it with a spear head stabbed, it would be broken. It was unknown whether they could even save their lives. After the horse riders rushed over, the ground was still trembling slightly, and the dust on the dirt road was raised high. The group behind didn't immediately come over, but stopped for a while, waiting for the smoke and dust to be blown away by the wind before the group leisurely passed by. During this period of time, before the group arrived, the people who were hiding at the side didn't dare to set foot on this road, so they could only wait. When this group of people all passed by, they could then walk on the road. Otherwise, the scene just now would repeat itself. Didn't they see that the people who rushed over all stopped and stared at them? One of the people on the horse even held a spear and made a poking gesture at them, meaning to move away. If they dared to step on it, they would die. This was strength. If they were weaker than others, they could only stand aside. When a group of people with the shining armor and several giant beasts obediently pulled the carts away, the caravan at the side of the road trembled on the road. Those people just now, who were they? Someone in the caravan asked. Didn't you see the words on the flag? An elder said, those people should be from the royal city. Those nobles? With their formation, what are they going to do? This kind of group could destroy a city, which unlucky tribe provoked them. In the past, it was rare to see this group of nobles being serious. Who knows? The caravan once again set off, but the scene just now became a topic of discussion. Along the way, they discussed who those people were going to deal with. If they passed by a city, they would have to ask. On the other side, in the group that had just passed by, there were several carts pulled by giant beasts. The carriages were covered with patterned silk cloth. One of the carriages was pulled by a huge white, multi-horned, rhinoceros-like beast. There were a few people in luxurious clothing sitting on a cushion in the middle. There was a young man sitting on the cushion, but the long hair hanging down from his temples was already silver white. At this time, the young man had a square wooden plate in front of him. On the plate were some diagrams that intersected with each other. 7 smooth, white jade stones were placed on the plate, each of them glowing with a glossy light. Izong, what did the divination say? A young girl wearing exquisite leather armor couldn't help but ask. The man sitting on the cushion looked away from the plate and raised his hand to point in a direction. Over there, the Yinjiao people are still in the forest. They haven't stopped. What are the Yinjiao people doing? The girl in leather armor sat down dejectedly and looked in the direction Izong was pointing. Izong's divination skills were among the best in the Yi family. No one doubted his results. Could it be that they were scared by us? They were so scared that they moved. Maybe they're looking for a new place to settle down. But those tribesmen like to hide in the forest, another young man in the carriage said. Thinking of the complicated terrain and dense forest, as well as the possibility of encountering all kinds of poisonous insects, ferocious beasts, and even king beasts, they weren't stupid enough to kill their way into the forest. That was why they leaked the information from Izong's divination to other people who were interested. As long as the Yinjiao people dared to come out of the forest, they could directly kill them. It was best to let those people force the Yinjiao people to a remote place first. After the others had exhausted the Yinjiao forces, they could carry out the final cleanup. Fire crystals? Salt? Given the character of the Yinjiao people, they wouldn't give them away so easily. They would definitely keep them in their hands. At most, a small part of them would be taken away by those who chased after them first. Even if all the fire crystals and salt were taken away by those who chased after them first, they would only feel a little regret. After all, their main target this time was only the Yinjiao people. These people wanted to use the Yinjiao matter to gain merit. Since the fire seed disappeared, the cohesiveness of the tribes gradually weakened. There were scattered people. These people came from different tribes, and because of their interests or hobbies, they gathered together to form new forces. Among these forces, there were many who specialized in robbery or assassination. For example, the Green Peak, who were famous for robbing, or the Night Clan, who were famous for taking bribes to assassinate. Once these forces were attracted by a huge profit, they would become hungry wolves that smell blood. They would pounce on the scent. Are the Yinjiao people really that scary? Someone asked. I know that. When that Yinjiao person sent the head of the Liu family flying with one blow, I was sitting in the tower at the city gate. At that time, the young man rattled on and on about what had happened. I heard that our ancestors had wanted to destroy the Yinjiao people for a long time, but the Yinjiao people were always hiding in the forest. Gradually, we forgot about this tribe. Only every time the Yinjiao people caused trouble, we remember. I heard that the Yinjiao people can control beast kings. Is that true? The girl in leather armor asked curiously. You believe that? Why not? Isn't that what everyone says? No, I have to call the head of the fox tribe over and ask him. The girl with the wallet pulled the curtain aside and gave some instructions to the people outside. Not long after, the chief of the fox tribe was brought over from the carriage behind. Once in the car, the head of the fox tribe felt uncomfortable. He used to be the head of the tribe, the boss. But now that he had come to the royal city, he felt inferior to these young people. After all, they were the best of the 6 noble families in the royal city. Greetings, young masters, the head of the fox tribe said, suppressing his discomfort. You're the head of the fox tribe? I heard that you were slaughtered by the Yinjiao people? The girl in leather armor asked. Veins popped on the head of the fox tribe. What did she mean by slaughtered by the Yinjiao people? Weren't the people who had been brought into the royal city human? Also, what was with that tone of disdain? Was she looking down on them? Clenching his fists, the head of the fox tribe suppressed his anger and sighed. The Yinjiao people are indeed dangerous. With that, the head of the fox tribe repeated what he had prepared. He left out the details of the beast, so that it sounded as if the Yinjiao people could really control the beast. All right, you can go now. I got it. The girl in leather armor waved him away as if shooing away a fly. The head of the fox tribe took a deep breath and jumped out of the car. After the head of the fox tribe left, the girl's expression darkened. He's lying. I told you. The Yinjiao people aren't as scary as the rumors say. They're just exaggerating in order to deal with them. As for what happened at the city gate, it must be some secret technique. That Xiaoxian guy can't be that powerful. A young man leaned against the side with his arms crossed. Besides, so what if the head of the fox tribe is lying? as long as we get what we want. Flap, flap, flap. Outside the car, there was the sound of flapping wings. The people inside perked up. They lifted the curtains and let in a striped bird. There was a thin roll of animal skin in its claws. Carefully, the bird unfurled the skin and read the words on it. After reading it, Yizong said, "Don't count on Green Peak. They've leaked Yinjiao's general location to the Night Clan." Chapter 484. What's going on? Green Peak should have caught up with the Yinjiao by now. Aren't they supposed to be the fastest at tracking? Asked the girl in leather armor. Green Peak decided to postpone their pursuit, said Yizong. That was what the letter said. It wasn't that they couldn't catch up, but they were postponing their pursuit. The people of Green Peak were scared. The people of Green Peak had a special characteristic. If one of their tentacles was chopped off, they would retract all of their tentacles and watch quietly. So you're saying that Green Peak encountered something unexpected? Asked the young man next to him. What exactly was it that was out of his expectations? The people in the carriage couldn't imagine. Even Yizong couldn't get an answer through divination. We'll have to ask Green Peak in the future. In the forest, as they continued forward, the tribesmen were already far away from familiar places. Fortunately, Xiaoxian still remembered the place and drew a map from his memory for Zheng Luo to refer to. If there wasn't anything special in this area, the tribesmen wouldn't come here. When Xiaoxian first met the Taiha people here, it was because they were chasing the long-clawed monkey. The journey that took Xiaoxian 2 days back then took the tribe almost 7 days to move. Fortunately, they got used to the rhythm of the journey and sped up a lot. We're almost at that mountain. Remember to prepare water. It'll get drier later, reminded Xiaoxian. After that, Xiaoxian sat on the side and took out a straw rope to perform divination. These days, he would perform divination every day. After all, he had so many people with him, and it was related to the entire tribe. He couldn't be careless. Even if he didn't get anything, he would still try. In the past, continuous divination would cause him to feel exhausted due to exhaustion. However, it was unknown whether it was because he had trained to control the power of the bone ornaments or some other reason. But now, divination was much easier. However, many things could not be predicted by divination. The tribesmen were already used to Xiaoxian doing this every day. In fact, every time Xiaoxian took out the rope, Zheng Luo and Duo Kong would gather around and wait. After Xiaoxian finished tying the knot, Zheng Luo asked, "What did you get this time?" "We have to be careful tonight," Xiaoxian said. Zheng Luo's expression changed. Someone's coming tonight? In the past few days, they had also encountered other people. If it wasn't for Xiaoxian's frequent traps, they would have encountered even more people. However, there were very few pursuers that appeared at night. Zheng Luo got up and paced back and forth. "Let's find a place to settle the tribesmen first. Don't be too busy when the time comes." The dark environment at night was very restrictive for the Yinjiao people. Plus, if a fight broke out, others might get hurt. Why don't we speed up? We'll definitely reach that mountain before nightfall. I remember there's a place to hide there, Xiaoxian suggested. There weren't many mountains around, and they were very short. There was no place to hide. Okay, that's it. The team got up and set off again. Along the way, Xiaoxian discussed countermeasures with Zheng Luo and the others. In the evening, the team reached the mountain. It was like a dividing line. On one side of the mountain, there were many moist rivers. On the other side, it was much drier. There were no caves on the mountain, but there were a few narrow crevices for the elderly, children, and women who hadn't awakened their totemic powers. These people who didn't have much fighting power could hide in there to prevent sneak attacks. The sun gradually disappeared and the sky darkened. Zheng Luo and the others stood on the mountain and looked down at the forest below. They should be here soon. Have you distributed the things? Everyone knows what to do, right? Xiaoxian asked the people standing behind him. Yes, the soldiers replied. Even if they didn't understand why Xiaoxian was doing this, they just had to do as he said. Zheng Luo stretched his shoulders and waved his arms to warm up. His eyes were cold as he looked at the forest at the foot of the mountain. All these years, the Flaming Horns rarely bullied others. Even when they fought, they followed the rules of the jungle. If they weren't forced into a corner, they wouldn't cause trouble. However, there were always people who liked to test their patience. Now, they were being hunted by all sides. Weren't they just taking advantage of the situation to steal? Bah, do they think we're easy to bully? We'll kill whoever comes. Those who fell into Zheng Luo's hands would have their necks broken without hesitation. Xiao Xian looked at the darkening sky. Let's go. Xiao Xian led the way down the mountain into the forest. Zheng Luo and the others followed closely behind. The forest at night was pitch black. There was almost no wind in the forest. It was so quiet that only the sounds of insects and strange birds could be heard. But soon, spots of light lit up in the forest. Some insects were attracted by the light and flew over. Xiao Xian leaned against a tree and tossed a glowing crystal into the air. Suddenly, Xiao Xian's action of throwing the crystal stopped, and he looked at the forest not far away. Since you're here, don't hide. He threw the glowing crystal in his hand, drawing a bright line in the air. Whoosh! There was the sound of a rope being swung. A dense barrage of sharpened wooden spikes shot out into the forest ahead. Although they had just arrived and Xiao Xian could only make simple things, this was enough. Whoosh! 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 Following the sound of wooden spikes hitting hard objects, black figures rushed out of the forest and headed straight for Xiao Xian. These people were wrapped in black cloth, only revealing their eyes. If one looked closely at their eyes during the day, they would notice that their eyes were different from others. Their eyes looked like those of nocturnal animals. Their pupils dilated as they rushed out. Even in a completely dark environment, they were not afraid because they could see. The totemic power in Xiao Xian's body was operating at its peak. His muscles, bones, and even his blood were filled with totemic power. His body strength was greatly stimulated, like a sleeping beast that had awakened, revealing its fangs and claws. Xiao Xian's speed was too fast, and without the help of the glowing crystal, he was able to accurately meet the person in the lead. His sword was filled with murderous intent and an overbearing aura pressed down. Clang! The person who met Xiao Xian first had a bad premonition. His hair, which was wrapped in black cloth, stood on end. The sword in his hand hummed under the strong impact, as if it had been hit by a boulder. He wanted to throw the boulder away, but he found that the more strength he exerted, the greater the force on his arm. If it was only a boulder at the beginning, then in an instant, the boulder had become a mountain. It was unshakable. They knew that the Yin Jiao people were strong, but they did not expect it to be to this extent. In one exchange, the person in black at the front was sent flying. His arm was numb from the impact, and he did not even have time to use his skills. A sword with a cold metallic aura struck down like a bolt of lightning in the night. Poof! The person who had just regained his footing had a deep cut from his neck to his waist. Blood spurted out and could be heard clearly in the quiet forest. At the same time as Xiao Xian rushed out, Zheng Luo and the others made their move. After one of their companions fell, these men in black were only slightly frightened. However, they still had confidence. They were the kings of the night, and the night was their favorite hunting environment. This was because their eyes were most suitable for darkness. Even if there was no light at all, they could still see each other's figures clearly within a certain range. So what if they were strong? How could a mere Yin Jiao compete with them in terms of night movement? They were overestimating themselves. Who knew that just as they were about to collide with the Yin Jiao, they heard a loud bang. A thick smoke with a pungent smell spread out. Not to mention how the smell irritated their noses, the smoke that spread out blocked their line of sight. At night, Yin Jiao people's vision was limited and their movements were severely restricted. They could only rely on their hearing and perception. In the past, when they couldn't see anything at night, the Flaming Horn tribesmen would rely on their hearing and sensitive senses. They wouldn't rely too much on their eyesight. Now that they couldn't see anything, they relied on their hearing and senses. Therefore, in terms of hearing and perception, they were still relatively strong. These people who planned a sneak attack at night did indeed have strong night vision. However, with a Taihe smoke bomb, they were all the same now. They could not see anything. Let's rely on our own abilities. These smoke bombs were given to them by the Taihe tribe before they left. They were placed in the same bag as the other herbs. The shaman had found them while rummaging through the herbs. These smoke bombs were a secret product of the Taiha tribe. It was said that the Taiha ancestors learned from wild beasts in the forest and finally perfected it. If they encountered a beast they could not defeat during a hunt, they would throw out these smoke bombs to escape. Although they could only confuse the beast for a moment. In a critical moment, 1 second of distraction could mean the difference between life and death. The Yinjiao people had asked the Taiha tribe for them many times, but they refused. They even asked for an exorbitant price. In the end, the Yinjiao people got angry and refused to buy. They would hunt with their own abilities. He didn't expect the Taiha tribe to give him 200 of these smoke bombs when he left this time. How generous of them. After all, these things were hard to make. Not everyone in the Taiha tribe had one, even for the Taiha tribe. They had not used these things before, but after Xiao Xian's divination predicted a possible sneak attack at night, he prepared them. Since the enemy chose to attack at night, it was very likely that they relied on their unique night vision. Xiao Xian had heard from the black bears in the royal city that there was a group of people who specialized in sneak attacks at night. They were called the Night Clan. After facing these people directly, Xiao Xian confirmed their identities. Taking a step back, even if they weren't from the Night Clan, and even if the smoke couldn't block the other party's line of sight, it would definitely have a disruptive effect. The smell would even stick to their bodies. As long as they didn't wash it, it would stay for a long time. Everyone could rely on their sense of smell to determine the other party's location. Chapter 485. If the Taiha tribesmen knew they were using something like this at night, they would be heartbroken. Ordinary people wouldn't think of using this at night, and the attackers obviously didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Therefore, just as they were feeling proud of their superior night vision, they were stunned by this sudden attack. The explosion of smoke enveloped the area. Before they could react, the Yinjiao people were already charging at them. The people who came with Xiao Xian and Zheng Luo were all people who cooperated well with each other. They could tell if it was their own people by the sound of their arms swinging. Xiao Xian heard a familiar cracking sound and raised an eyebrow. It was the sound of Zheng Luo crushing someone's arm. Xiao Xian had seen similar things happen before. Although the Yinjiao tribesmen and the night tribesmen in black couldn't see through the smoke, it was different for Xiao Xian. He was able to see everyone present through the smoke. Clang! Crack! The back of Duo Kang's axe smashed into a man in black. A piece of metal armor on his chest caved in, followed by the crisp sound of bones breaking. It wasn't the blade of the axe that broke it, it was the back of the axe that broke it. This was the first time the night tribesmen faced the warriors of the Flaming Horn tribe, and it was also an unforgettable experience. Only when they fought could they experience the ferocious beast's strength and ferocious attacks. The night tribesmen felt like they weren't facing humans, but ferocious beasts that suddenly jumped out of the forest. Retreat, one of them shouted. In terms of strength, they were no match for these Yinjiao tribesmen. Moreover, under such brute force, many of their techniques would be delayed for a moment because they needed time to recover from the numbness in their muscles. What's more, the smoke also obstructed their vision. Their advantage was their night vision, not fighting blindly with these barbarians here. Even worse, under the same blind situation, these Yinjiao barbarians reacted faster than them. He could only retreat for now. They retreated, but not directly. Instead, they retreated from the area covered in smoke. The smoke that they threw out couldn't possibly cover the entire forest. It only covered a small area. They'd be stupid to stay here and continue fighting with the Yinjiao. As soon as the men in black came out of the smoke-shrouded area, a rain of arrows shot towards them. Those who were fast enough dodged the arrows and ran away. Those who were a little slower were shot and injured. Xiao Xian rushed over and finished them off. None of these arrows entered the smoke-shrouded area because there were many Yinjiao players inside. They followed Xiao Xian's plan and did not leave to pursue the men in black for the time being. Instead, they waited until the last volley of arrows had been fired and received Xiao Xian's signal to leave. Not every Yinjiao player who rushed out was hiding in the smoke-shrouded area. Apart from a few Yinjiao players who were still hiding in the forest, Xiao Xian was the only one who was exposed. Most of the men in black who had been injured by the arrows had been Xiao Xian's last hits. Not far from the bushes, there were two men staring at Xiao Xian. They drew their bows and narrowed their eyes, locking onto Xiao Xian. Only they had the eyesight to aim at a target in the dark of night. Bzzzt. There was the faint sound of a bowstring vibrating. The metal arrowhead spun and flew at high speed towards Xiao Xian's direction. It was aimed at Xiao Xian's heart. Xiao Xian's eyes twitched. With a flick of his wrist, his sword swayed and blocked in front of him. Clang! The arrowhead struck the sword with a crisp sound that made people's hearts tremble. With the arrow blocked, Xiao Xian looked towards the bushes. There really were archers. Xiao Xian activated the totemic power in his body. The totemic patterns on his body were blocked by the grass and mud. He carefully sensed every change in the air around him. His ears caught every slight sound, felt the movement of the grass and the wind, and even the heartbeat of the enemy who was holding their breath. Xiao Xian could sense the presence of anyone within a radius of 10 meters. There was another person nearby. He could smell a suspicious scent and hear the other person's breathing. Even though the other person was trying his best to hide his presence, Xiao Xian could still sense his specific location. Without relying on his night vision, Xiao Xian could even sense the other person's grip on the hilt of his sword. This was the sensory ability he had developed after hunting for a long time, even at night. When Xiao Xian looked towards the bushes, the two archers hiding behind the bushes suddenly had a strange feeling. It was as if the other person could see through the cover of the night and the leaves to see where they were. Every movement they made, even every detail of their fingers on the bowstring, could be seen by the other person. Under this strange feeling, the two archers looked at each other. What should we do? Move to another place? One of the archers signaled silently with his eyes. The other archer looked towards Xiao Xian. Coincidentally, Xiao Xian was walking towards them. The strange feeling in his heart grew even stronger. Under this strange feeling, the person drew an arrow and shot it. His movements were smooth and fluid. From drawing the arrow to shooting, it only took an instant. Before the enemy shot the arrow, Xiao Xian had already moved. He quickly ran towards the direction of the arrow. His body was like a swift leopard as he rushed straight over. Then he suddenly bent his knees and bounced up. His feet left the ground, and when his body leaped up, the sword in the air collided with the arrow that was shot towards him. Clang! The arrow was shaken off. Xiao Xian hooked onto a branch and nimbly flipped over. Before landing, his other hand caught the arrow that was shaken off, hit the branch and bounced back and threw it out. Puffed. There was a muffled groan. One of the two archers hiding behind the bushes was pierced by the arrow. Blood flowed out from where the arrow had pierced through. The injured man wanted to stand up and run away, but as soon as he moved, he felt a sharp pain in his body. He looked down at his chest and saw that there was an animal bone armor protecting his heart. The arrow did not penetrate this animal bone armor. To be precise, the arrow did not touch this animal bone armor. Instead, it grazed the edge of the armor. If it had been slightly off course, it would have hit the armor. Coincidence? Or the injured archer's eyes were filled with confusion and surprise. Despair rose in his heart. At the same time, a thought appeared in his mind. He was so shocked that large drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. His body could not support itself. He fell to the ground and groaned in pain. The arrows they shot were smeared with poison. As long as one was injured by the arrowhead, the poison would quickly spread through the body. But when they smeared the poison on their arrows, they did not expect that the arrows they shot would be used on their own people. The archer in black looked in Xiao Xian's direction again. He saw Xiao Xian's figure getting closer and closer. His whole body trembled violently. It was not clear whether it was because of the pain or because of the shock of his guess. Before he lost consciousness, he roared, "He can see us!" The other archer wanted to run, but Xiao Xian's sword had already come down. The people hiding in other places were shocked. They had all heard the roars of their own people. "He can see us? How is that possible? Aren't they Yinjiao people?" They had never heard of Yinjiao people being able to see at night. If that was really the case, then it was beyond their expectations. How is that possible? How is that possible? The archer hiding behind a tree not far from Xiao Xian felt his heart beat wildly. If the other party could see at night, then what advantage would they have? Just as he was about to run, he suddenly heard a rustling sound behind him. It sounded like the wind blowing through tree branches. His heart trembled. He turned around and slashed. Clang! Xiao Xian held the sword in his hand. The air around the blade was mixed with the smell of blood. It pressed down from above like the claws of a giant beast, mercilessly stomping down. The archer who took the blow felt pain worse than if he had been chopped by a knife or an axe. His bones felt like they were about to fall apart, and his legs almost gave way. His face, which had been full of murderous intent, was now contorted by the pain that spread from his wrist to his arm. But it was night, and his face was covered with a black cloth, so no one could see his expression. The sound of the blades clashing against each other was enough to make people feel as if they were in ice. Their eardrums trembled, their hair stood on end, and their muscles trembled. The sword edge drew a sickle-like arc-poochie. Blood spurted out. Xiao Xian didn't look at the fallen archer. He bent his little finger and blew into it. This was a signal to the people in the smoke, as well as the Yinjiao warriors hiding in other places, that they could start hunting. Even at night, even though this was a place they had never been to before, they could still clearly distinguish the scents of the various creatures in the forest, as well as the people hiding in the bushes behind the tree trunks and on the branches. Xiao Xian continued to look for the archers in hiding, to prevent them from shooting in the dark. The night was still long. When the first rays of Yangguang shone on the forest in the early morning, the team on the mountain was ready to set off. In addition to those in the forest, the mountain had also been attacked, but there were relatively few sneak attacks on the mountain. The sacrificed warriors had been cremated, and the fire used was the fire of the kindling that the shaman had summoned by building a temporary fire pit. As long as the people were there, the kindling would be there. The shaman had once said that the souls of the dead would return to the kindling. The people of the tribe often said that their ancestors and other deceased people were with them. The souls were there, and there was no sorrow. As long as there were people alive, the kindling would continue to be passed on. After crossing the mountain, they arrived at the dry grassland. Xiao Xian also met the people on horseback that he had seen before, but Xiao Xian didn't say much to them. Those people looked at the Yinjiao tribe with guarded eyes. After all, anyone who saw a migrating team would be on guard. Seeing that the Yinjiao team had no intention of staying, those people let out a long sigh of relief. Who were those people that just passed by? I don't know. They didn't look easy to get along with. Who cares? As long as they don't settle in our territory, it's fine. Don't try to steal our territory. But such a large tribe, and they don't look weak. Why would they migrate? This was a remote area, and news was delayed for a long time. They weren't well informed at all, so they didn't know about the Yinjiao team. So when they saw the Yinjiao team, they were just curious about where they were going. After all, there was fertile land and plenty of prey, which was the opposite direction of where the team was going. Chapter 486. From the grasslands to the dry and barren land where the 1,000-grain gold was found, Xiao Xian used the knowledge Jiju taught him to identify herbs and told the tribesmen to prepare some. Along the way, there were too many things. They were hunted down, and there were all kinds of dangers in the forest. The injured had used up a lot of medicine. The medicine given by the Taihe tribe was almost gone. Although they had picked some herbs along the way, they couldn't withstand the huge consumption. Now, they didn't have much medicine left. Those that had not awakened their totemic power, as well as the elderly, would inevitably fall ill after a long period of time. It had been 20 days since they set off from the tribe. There was still a long way to go, and they had to keep going. Naturally, they had to prepare more herbs. Xiao Xian taught the tribesmen how to identify the herbs in this area. If they encountered any, they had to pick them and prepare. Looking up at the sky, Xiao Xian noticed a bird flying high in the sky. He could not see what it looked like. It flew too high and nimbly. Even arrows would not be able to shoot it down. "What's wrong?" asked Zheng Luo as he walked over. That bird appeared again. Xiao Xian pointed at the shadow in the sky. Again, Zheng Luo was alert. It must be someone's pet, or it's tracking our movements. Chief, why do you think the people from Royal City haven't appeared yet? Asked Xiao Xian. You mean, that bird belongs to Royal City? Zheng Luo fell silent. He wasn't someone who didn't know anything. He knew that once the people in King City decided to deal with someone, they would definitely take action. The people they had met before were just tentacles that the people in King City had released first. Since other people could track the movements of the Flaming Horn tribe, the people of King City must know something. They didn't show up. Maybe they were waiting for the best time. They're here too? Asked Zheng Luo. Although it was a question, Zheng Luo was already 50% sure. The Royal City's people aren't used to the forest, so they haven't made a move yet. They're probably waiting for us to leave the forest and go to an open area before making a move. Xiao Xian thought about the terrain of the place they had passed through when they first came here. After leaving this barren mountain, we will pass through a more open area with more people. The road is also relatively flat. Only after passing through that area will we enter the semi-desert area. The people from the Royal City are most likely to appear on the road in the middle. Zheng Luo's heart sank. Although they didn't like the pretentious people in King City, they had to admit that the 6 aristocratic families, who used to be the strongest tribes, were definitely not to be underestimated, to be able to take down their current territory and develop to such a scale. There were children, old people, and women who hadn't awakened yet. They couldn't let go of the battle at all, nor could they give up on these people. As for the solution, the only way was to leave some people behind to block the Royal City's pursuit team and let the rest of the tribe continue their journey. Against the people from the Royal City, it was very likely that they would never be able to keep up with the team. They couldn't even be cremated. However, for the tribe, sacrifices were inevitable. Even Zheng Luo was prepared to stay behind. We have to arrange for some people to stay behind the team. Zheng Luo looked at the barren mountains around them and said, I'll discuss this with Duo Kong. While the team was hurrying, Zheng Luo talked to the warriors according to the situation of each family. Some families were supported by one person, so they definitely couldn't let him stay behind the team. Zheng Luo calculated that to temporarily block the Royal City's team, at least 1,000 people would be needed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be of much use. Zheng Luo wanted to add himself, but he was the chief and had to lead the team. Even if he wanted to, the others wouldn't allow it. How could a team without a leader move forward? Should they appoint a new chief now? I'll just join. Brother, you lead the team and keep moving, said Zheng Cheng as he strode over. Although Zheng Cheng was rash, he wasn't much weaker than Zheng Luo. Otherwise, he wouldn't have competed with Zheng Luo for the position of chief. Usually, the two brothers didn't see eye to eye. Now, Zheng Cheng stood up. Zheng Luo looked at his younger brother and suddenly felt his eyes sting. He opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by Zheng Cheng. Don't talk nonsense. That's it. How many people are there? Let me see. Zheng Cheng snatched the name sheet from Zheng Luo's hand. Oh, Duo Kong and Guang Yi are here too. Watcher is here too. Not bad, not bad. There's also Zhue, he's got guts. And Xiao Xian. That's not right. Brother, why is Xiao Xian's name on this? How can you put Xiao Xian's name on this? You're getting more and more muddle-headed as a chief. Zheng Cheng took the opportunity to scold his brother. Zheng Luo was stunned too. He snatched the sheet back. He had told everyone about it during the break. Then, he placed the sheet on a rock for those who met the requirements and were willing to stay to write their names on it. There were too many people there, so he didn't notice. When did Xiao Xian write his name? Anyone in the team could stay, even Zheng Luo. Only 2 people couldn't stay. One was the shamaness. Many things couldn't be done without the shamaness. This time, the shamaness had to be with them. The other person was Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was the tribe's elder and wore the ancestral bow and ornaments. If they wanted to bring the tribe back to the old land, other than the shamaness, they couldn't do it without Xiao Xian. Plus, Xiao Xian was from there. Without Xiao Xian, even if they could go back, it would be difficult. They didn't know anything about the other side. Cross it off, cross it off. Hurry up and cross off Xiao Xian's name. Zheng Cheng dug out a ball of dark green mud from somewhere and pasted it on Xiao Xian's name. In the next few days, the team continued on their journey. Zheng Luo continued to check the name list to see if they met his requirements. When they were about to leave the barren mountains, Zheng Luo gave the final name list. These 1,000 people would be at the back of the team. If they encountered people from Royal City, they would have to hold them off. They would be the tribe's last shield against the Royal City's spears. There was a mournful atmosphere in the team. However, they had already explained everything in the past few days. These people knew what they had to do and the possible consequences. Zheng Luo finished reporting the name list and gave a simple explanation. He put away the cloth and wiped his red eyes. Although he had seen many casualties along the way, this time it was not the small forces from before. It was a tough battle. As the leader, Zheng Luo felt sad too. However, in order to go back, the necessary sacrifices had to be made. If there was a need later, he would step up himself. He rubbed his eyes and opened them to see Xiao Xian standing in front of him. Knowing why, Zheng Luo coughed. Xiao Xian, you know that everyone else in our tribe can stay, including me. We can all stay behind. Only you and the shamaness can't. If not, who's going to lead the tribe back to the old land? Xiao Xian paused. I just want to try. Try what? Zheng Luo was confused. If we meet people from Royal City, I want to try to stop them. If I can't, I can at least cause them some trouble. You? What trouble do you want to cause them? No, you want to borrow the power of our ancestors. Zheng Luo glared at Xiao Xian. Yes. Xiao Xian nodded. No, you want to borrow the power of our ancestors to bring the tribe back. You can't risk it here. It wasn't easy for us to get here. You can't gamble with this. Zheng Luo refused firmly. If our ancestors were here, they wouldn't want everyone to die here just to go back. Chief, you know that I can survive a king beast. If people from Royal City come, I can survive too. Plus, I can make it easier for the warriors and buy more time for the team. No, the ancestors agreed. Ask the bow and ornament if you don't believe me. Xiao Xian took it off and handed it to Zheng Luo. Zheng Luo's facial muscles twitched. How the hell did he have the ability to communicate with his ancestors? It was always the shamaness who communicated with them. Seeing that Xiao Xian was still staring at him, Zheng Luo looked at the bone ornament in front of him, then turned his head and waved his hand. Go find a shamaness. We'll do whatever she says. Xiao Xian grinned. The shamaness wouldn't object. Indeed, the shamaness didn't object. When she heard Xiao Xian say he wanted to stay behind, she stared at Xiao Xian expressionlessly for almost 10 minutes. Xiao Xian's forehead was sweating. Finally, she said lightly, go. If it wasn't for the bulging veins on the back of her hand from gripping her walking stick too hard, people would have thought she was as calm as she looked. No one could be calm at a time like this. They were confused and uncertain about their future, worried and anxious about what was to come. However, they had already come this far. There was no turning back. Walking out of this barren mountain, the view became wider and more human. Because people often walked on the grass, several clear paths were formed. There were also some clear ruts on the ground. The people around them were all trading teams from different tribes. However, compared to He Xiong's caravans, they were much smaller. They were just trading teams from smaller tribes. The largest group had less than 100 people, while the smallest group only had 20 or 30 people. When they saw the Yinjiao team, they all looked over curiously. They had never seen the Yinjiao people before. They were just curious about where this team had come from. They looked like they had traveled a long way. Their clothes were dirty and their faces were tired, but it couldn't hide their aura. They were not to be trifled with. That was the first impression they had. Thus, these people lowered their heads and hurried away. They were worried that the Yinjiao people would steal their goods. Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. The bird was no longer there, but that didn't mean they had given up on watching. In fact, they didn't think there was a need to do so. They were almost here. Chapter 487. As if feeling the tension and danger in the air, the small caravans quickened their pace again. Although everything was calm now, there was an inexplicable sense of trepidation that made them unable to calm down. Something was about to happen. The cows and horses that were pulling the carts were still anxiously stomping their hooves. They even wanted to deviate from their original route and run to the side, but they were forcefully pulled back. A cart-pulling beast that looked like a deer that had lost its antlers was snorting from its nose. It seemed to have a bad temper. It kept raising its head as if it was about to stand up. The people around had to go and suppress it. "What's going on?" "I don't know, it seems to be going crazy." "Not just us, look at the side." As far as the eyes could see, all the beasts that were pulling the carts, including the docile ones and the irritable ones, all had similar changes. It was as if they were trying to escape, even more so than before. The horses neighed and the beasts roared. It was chaos. "What's going on?" Someone couldn't help but shout. "Wait, listen." Rumble. There seemed to be a rumbling sound coming from afar. The ground was shaking. Although it was not obvious now, there was indeed movement. The cautious people pulled the carts and horses, standing in place and looking around cautiously. Some even turned back to look at the tribe that they had seen not long ago. Was it them? No, it wasn't. The sound came from another direction. Not long after, the sound became more and more obvious. Even those who had not awakened their totemic power could hear it clearly. In the distance, there was a cloud of dust at the intersection of heaven and earth. Because most of the surroundings were grasslands, there was not much dust, but it was still very obvious. A huge team of thousands appeared. The metal armors and weapons, under Yang Wang's gaze, reflected a dazzling light. It was as if the entire team was shrouded in light. As the team moved forward, layer by layer, like the ripples on the surface of a lake. Looking from afar, a rough estimate showed that this team should be no less than 4,000 people. It did not sound like a lot, but in this relatively small place where most tribes only had 1,000 or 2,000 people, such a well-equipped team that seemed to be strong could easily wipe out any tribe here. Gulp! The people who saw this swallowed their saliva. At this moment, they did not even know what to say. After living in such a remote place for so long, they had never seen such a scene before. A member of the nobility? Only the nobles had such luxurious equipment. But why did so many people come to this place? Regardless of why these people were here, seeing that the group was getting closer and closer, they hurriedly called for the people of the trading team to hide. This group was even more terrifying than the migrating group they had just seen. After all, there were many elderly, children, and women in the migration team they had seen earlier. However, this team was almost entirely made up of warriors who had come to fight. "Dodge! Get out of the way!" Those who were driving the carriages and those who were moving the goods hurriedly moved to the side, hoping that they would not block the path of these people. Rumble! It was as if thunder was approaching. The giant beast, which was much thicker than 4 people stacked on top of each other, vigorously swung its 4 limbs and ran on the grass. To it, this was just a small jog. The tremors caused by his large feet stomping on the ground caused even the grass on the ground to be shaken up. Inside the cabin of the biggest car, Izong frowned and looked doubtfully at the square plate in front of him. He reached out and grabbed a handful of fine golden sand from a clay bowl beside him and sprinkled it on the square plate. The fine golden sand spontaneously separated into stripes on the square plate. The stripes were exactly where the lines were drawn on the square plate. The fine golden sand was still moving. Some moved closer to the jade stone, while others moved away. However, it did not take long for the changes to stop. Then, with a soft pop, the golden sand in the square plate spontaneously dispersed. "What's wrong, Izong? Did the divination come out?" Several people next to him came over and asked. "Yin Jiao is just ahead. It's just that I can't divine anything more." Izong's indifferent face showed a rare, conflicted expression. He wanted to divine more, but it was as if there was a layer of fog. Every time he divined, it was a mess. The jade stone in the square plate could not form a result. It was very chaotic, especially when it came to the young Yin Jiao elder. He really could not divine anything at all. At first, it was understandable that he couldn't divine anything. But now, the more he understood, the more he could divine. He should have been able to divine something useful, but other than the general movements of the Flaming Horn tribe, he couldn't divine anything else. Izong had heard from Yi Bing that Yi Bing had divined something about the Yin Jiao in the tower beside the royal city's gate, but he could not divine anything. Now, the same thing was happening to Izong. It was unbelievable. No wonder the Yi family had always been on guard against the Yin Jiao tribe. The Yin Jiao tribe really made them feel uneasy. If this uneasy factor was not removed, it was believed that many people in the Yi family would not be able to live peacefully. Yi Bing, after returning from the tower, seemed to have hit a bottleneck and could not make any further progress. The elders also said in private that if Yi Bing could not break through this bottleneck, he would be stuck here. For the Yi family, they would give up on cultivating him. Thinking about Yi Bing's situation, Izong picked up a jade stone in the square plate and slowly rubbed it, thinking. The girl in leather armor next to him was about to ask something, but suddenly her expression changed. She opened the animal skin bag hanging on her waist and reached out to take out a creature that looked like a bee. It was the size of a thumb and had an oval body. At this moment, this small flying insect was lying in the girl's hand, facing one direction and flapping its wings. Although it had wings, they were too small compared to its fat body. It could not fly at all. The movement of its wings was just a reflection of its mood at this moment. It was excited. There are fire crystals, the girl in leather armor said. This fat flying insect would only behave like this when it smelled the fire crystals. Looking at the direction it was facing, it was the direction they were heading. It must be the Yin Jiao people. The Yin Jiao people had salt and fire crystals. They must have brought them with them when they were migrating. The others in the carriage were also in high spirits. I wonder how many fire crystals the Yin Jiao people have. Compared to the excitement of the others, Izong was still silent. He was not interested in the fire crystals. What he really cared about was whether the Yin Jiao tribe had a better divination ability than the Yi family, and the reason why his divination had always failed. For the Yi family, the fire crystals were not very helpful. Fire crystals were the favorite of fighting tribes. Even if they had fire crystals, most of them were given to people who worked for them. Warriors were human beings, and wise men were the best. The Yi family had always thought so. They were willing to be wise men and leave the physical work to others. The insect in the girl's hand was flapping its wings faster and faster. We're close. The Yin Jiao people are nearby. The girl in leather armor lifted the curtain and looked out, ignoring the dust outside. Yin Jiao people. They're Yin Jiao people. The rest of the people in the carriage also lifted the curtains and looked forward. In front of them, about 800 paces away, stood a row of people. When the small caravans passing by were trying to avoid them, this row of people stood out. Although they could not see their faces clearly, the people in the carriage could guess who they were. They must be Yin Jiao people. Why are there so few of them? They must have known we were coming, so they were prepared. It doesn't look like they were in a hurry. Izong looked up. He could not be sure if the Yin Jiao people were guessing or divining. No matter what, this hidden threat had to be removed. He did not want to end up like Yi Bing. As long as Yin Jiao was wiped off the face of this world, the so-called obstacles and interference would cease to exist. The carriage pulled by the giant beast slowed down, allowing the other warriors to rush forward. As for the fear that the Yin Jiao people were setting up traps, there was no need. Based on their calculations, the Yin Jiao people did not have the time to set up such traps. In the carriage behind them, the fox and a few other leaders of tribes who had sided with the royal city during the winter came out. Those who sided with the royal city had to show their sincerity and value. They had sent many people to Yin Jiao this time. Of the 5,000 people, 2,000 were from these tribes. The fox leader looked at the row of people in front of him, his eyes filled with hatred. They had lost the fire crystals and the salt mines. Even their remaining treasures had been handed over to the Yi family and the nobles of the royal city when they sided with the royal city. As the leader of a tribe, he had to put on a smiling face in front of those brats from the royal city. What a disgrace! These losses he would get back from the people of the Flaming Horns tribe. The salt, fire crystals, and other things that he had lost, he would get them back with his own hands. The people in front received the order and sped up. The rumbling of hooves carried murderous intent as they galloped forward. Behind the first wave of cavalry, More warriors followed. Seeing the people in front charge past, the fox leader, who was watching from the carriage, smirked. From today onwards, the Yinjiao tribe would disappear from the face of this world. None of the people the royal city wanted to deal with were still alive. Some of the small caravans watched from afar. Even from afar, they could imagine the ferocious aura that the people standing on that path had to endure. The Yinjiao people who were directly facing this group felt it even more strongly. The ground was about to shake. Avoiding it could save them from danger temporarily. But could they avoid it now? Avoiding it meant that they would be hunted down endlessly. They could not avoid it. Even if all of them died in battle, they could not avoid it. Zheng Cheng raised his eyebrows. This was his first time taking on such an important task. Holding the heavy sword in his hand, Zheng Cheng's eyes flashed coldly. Feeling the ground shake more and more violently, Zheng Cheng took a deep breath and raised the arm holding the sword. He was about to say something when Xiao Xian said, "All of you back off. I'll go first." Zheng Cheng, who had been about to shout out his courage, Zheng Cheng stopped himself and looked at Xiao Xian as if he did not understand. He wanted to ask something, but Duo Kong dragged him back. Chapter 488. What was going on? Looking at the row of people retreating, whether it was the people watching from the beast carriages or the small caravans watching from afar, they were all puzzled. Could it be that there was actually an ambush? Or had they changed their minds and decided to retreat? Not everyone retreated. There was still one person standing there. Whether it was the people from the small caravan, the cavalry that was charging forward, or the people who were watching the battle from the beast-drawn carriages, none of them could believe their eyes. What were the Yinjiao people planning? Why did they all retreat, leaving only one person standing there? Xiao Xian from Yinjiao. Someone who recognized Xiao Xian shouted. He's Xiao Xian, the Yinjiao boy who sent Lu Zong flying with one slap? The girl in leather armor looked at the figure in front of her. I heard that the boy is very close to Jingu from the Ji family. Aren't you afraid that Jingu will be angry if you kill him? A young man, twirling his sword, asked the girl next to him. The girl didn't care. Jingu doesn't interfere with politics. He only knows how to farm. He doesn't even know that the royal city is sending troops. By the time he finds out, the boy is already dead. Is Xiao Xian from Yinjiao really that powerful? Another person asked. The young man with the sword looked forward. With a twist of his wrist, the blade drew an arc and sliced a piece of grass that had been kicked away by the beast's hooves in half. I like to see how powerful that brat is. Some of the royal city troops had seen what happened at the city gates. They admitted that Xiao Xian from Yinjiao was indeed powerful. But that was then. The situation now was completely different. This boy dared to fight alone. He had a death wish. Xiao Xian sheathed his sword in the scabbard on his back and took out the bone ornament necklace around his neck. Ancestor, it's up to you now. From the day the tribe started migrating, Xiao Xian could feel the sound coming from the bone ornaments. No one else could hear it, but it sounded like a flame being blown by the wind. Xiao Xian sensed anger from the 4 bone ornaments. Did bone ornaments have emotions? Even if he didn't, it was possible that he did. After all, he was the incarnation of the ancestor and represented the will of the ancestor. He took the risk to stand here because he felt the bone ornament's anger. That was why he made this decision. The tall warhorse stomped its hooves, getting closer and closer. The knight on the horse was holding a spear that glowed with a bloodthirsty, cold light. Xiao Xian could even smell the flying dust. In the face of the suffocating killing intent and the seemingly unstoppable offensive, Xiao Xian, who stood there alone, was as insignificant as a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Xiao Xian's eyes were wide open in the face of this fierce attack. He stared straight ahead, secretly calculating in his heart. It was getting closer. It was getting closer. The charging knights aimed their spears at Xiao Xian. The bone ornaments made even louder sounds. Whoosh, whoosh. It sounded like a prairie fire being blown by the wind. Only Xiao Xian could hear it. Now was the time. Xiao Xian's totemic power and power of inheritance were activated to the maximum in an instant. The muscles all over his body twitched rapidly. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the thumping sounds, like the beating of war drums. Izong, who was in the carriage, sensed something. His eyelids twitched, and he stood up in shock. Because he was in such a hurry, he knocked over the tray in front of him and didn't even look at it. The charging knights raised their spears and were about to plunge them down in the next moment. But soon, their cold pupils constricted. Above their pupils, flames were reflected. The flames were like dragons flying out, dancing and twisting together, shooting straight into the sky. An unprecedented aura erupted from Xiao Xian's body. A scorching aura swept across, and the air seemed to be burning. The charging troops seemed to have met an invisible hand, blocking their advance. Some of them almost fell off their horses. What kind of aura was this? It made people tremble in fear, and their scalps tingled. Whoosh! In the instant, the flames expanded. A giant covered in flames seemed to walk out of thin air, looking down at everything on the ground. The world in front of him seemed to be dyed in flames, covered with a layer of fire. Xiao Xian looked ahead and lifted his foot. The giant flaming man also lifted his foot from the flames. Then, following Xiao Xian's foot, he stomped down. Boom! The powerful force, in the midst of the unprecedented aura, left a huge crater in the ground and made a shocking sound like thunder. The soil on the ground was peeled off and crushed like a huge firework. The hard rocks under the soil were also stepped on, and the sound of cracking was deafening. A crack that seemed to tear the entire ground plate rushed from the crater to the front. It was like a fast-growing branch, constantly branching out and branching out again and again. The hard rocks on the ground were blown up by the force of the vibration, tumbling in the air, and gravel flew everywhere. The charging troops, along with their horses, were blown away by the exploding rocks. They were unable to escape. Men and horses were thrown off their feet, and even their screams were drowned out by the roar of the earth. The whole world seemed to have been turned upside down. The earth trembled. The grass that had taken root, due to the drought, seemed to have been pulled out at the moment of the tremors. It swayed in the air, shattered into pieces, and dissipated with the airwaves. The rocks that were blown up from the cracked ground flew in the direction of the royal city troops. Faced with the high-speed flying rocks, the troops panicked. The giant beast that pulled the carriage roared, and its huge body shook. Its two front legs almost knelt under the tremors of the ground. Bang! A rock the size of a human head hit the side of the carriage, creating a dent. The carriage almost fell apart. If it weren't for the fact that the carriage was mostly made of metal, it wouldn't have been able to withstand the impact. The young man holding the sword trembled and almost dropped it. He stared at the flame giant with wide eyes. He had wanted to fight the kid himself, but now a few pieces of cloth around the carriage were torn off. They danced in the air with the airwaves. That's fierce. The people in the carriage jumped out of the beast carriage. Under the protection of the guards, they quickly retreated and dodged the attacks. They could hear the sound of flying rocks and the sound of falling rocks. Just listening to these sounds was enough to make people fearful. In the back of the carriage, the fox leader, who was holding on to the side of the carriage to steady himself, also trembled. His eyes were so wide open that they seemed to be about to pop out. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was this the power? Was this the power that Yin Jiao used to escape from the king beast? No wonder they could escape safely from the salt flats. No wonder the king beast couldn't stop them. No wonder they couldn't even find a body. This was it. The fox leader's usually cunning face was contorted with hatred. He could not take this lying down. He wanted to take back what he had lost from Yin Jiao. But he didn't even have the courage to charge forward. Retreat, the leader roared. They couldn't attack. The only thing they could do was retreat. No one could advance in the face of such power. Only death awaited them. The horses that had luckily escaped the fate of being flung away neighed in panic. The riders couldn't calm them down in a short time. All they could do was grab onto the horses next to avoid being thrown off. They left the battlefield together with the horses. Instinctively, the horses galloped away from the danger. Some of them tripped over cracks in the ground. Some were hit by flying stones, and some were knocked away by their panicked companions. The people from the small caravan who were watching from afar were all hiding behind their vehicles. They were far away, so there were no big rocks coming at them. However, there were flying pebbles and dust. The strong airwaves were so strong that they couldn't even open their eyes. One could only imagine what kind of impact those who were close to them were enduring. Everyone who had witnessed the scene was still in disbelief. It was as if they were hallucinating. Their hearts were still racing and their legs were shaking. They couldn't even stand up. Xiao Xian felt the totemic power running faster and faster in his body. He wondered if he should unleash another burst of power. He could still withstand another stomp, but seeing that the other side was retreating quickly, another stomp would not have much effect. It would be a waste of energy, so he stopped and waited for the other side's next reaction. If the other side wanted to charge again, he could stomp again. Behind Xiao Xian, the Yinjiao warriors who had retreated were prepared for this. Some had followed Zheng Luo to the salt mines before. Others had never seen anything like this before. Their jaws were still open, and they ate a mouthful of dust. They were prepared to die. Why did it feel like the elder alone was enough to take on all of them? The commotion was even greater than if all of them had gone into battle. The ground was cracked, piece by piece. Some were even flipped upside down. Half of the worm's body was still moving. This. Zheng Chang said this several times but couldn't say anything. Duo Kong and the others were the same. Although they had felt the power of a king beast at the salt flats, they were just like the horses that had been knocked over. They had fainted after being sent flying. It wasn't as shocking as seeing it with their own eyes. If they had been doubting whether Xiao Xian could take them back to the old haunt, now they were all confident. The royal city team finally managed to escape the fate of being smashed. After everything had stopped, they regrouped. The people who had been sitting in the largest carriage were now standing on the ground. They looked very disheveled. Their exquisite clothes were covered in dust and grass. Green grass juice and wet mud were splattered on their clothes. It was difficult to get rid of them. Whether it was the people who didn't take Yinjiao seriously or the people who were wary of Yinjiao, they were now filled with caution and deep fear. They had always thought that the rumors of the demonized Yinjiao were exaggerated. Now they knew that they had underestimated them. If they had been any closer to the charging cavalry, it wouldn't have been as easy as it was now. A gust of wind blew past, blowing away the dust on the ground. The ground was cracked and filled with large and small stones. It looked like it had been cut into pieces and sifted. People and horses were trapped in it, struggling. Some had already lost consciousness. On one end of the messy area, there was a person standing alone. On the other end, there was a huge team gathered there. The two sides looked at each other. At this moment, there was an eerie silence. Chapter 489. What should we do? Attack again? Why don't we wait for a while and see what happens? Standing on the cracked ground, the royal city team looked at the person standing on the other side. Although the flame giant had disappeared, Xiao Xian was still surrounded by flames. No one could be sure if the scene would repeat itself. The team looked at Xiao Xian in shock. What happened just now was too strange and shocking. It was just an instant change, but it turned everything around. The flame giant gave off an indescribable sense of danger. Even those who were far away could feel the extremely dangerous and oppressive aura. What was that? Asked the girl in leather armor, standing beside Yizong. I don't know. Although Yizong tried his best to remain calm, his heart was in turmoil. In that moment, he felt an extremely strong impact. It wasn't a physical one. They were a little further away, so they weren't seriously injured. However, they almost had a mental breakdown. They couldn't even concentrate, let alone perform a divination. There was no movement here for the time being. When Xiao Xian realized that the enemy wasn't going to attack again, he turned around and headed towards where Zheng Cheng and the others were. Yinjiao's migration team had already gone far into the semi-desert. They had to catch up with the team. Let's go first. Xiao Xian called the people who were standing there in a daze and ran in the direction of the tribe's migration. Hey, Xiao Xian, what was that? Was that the power of your ancestors? Can you do it again? Zheng Cheng looked at Xiao Xian expectantly. If this power could be used continuously, They wouldn't have to worry about the people from Royal City at all. Looking at their eager eyes, Xiao Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. No, the power that exploded just now was more successful than Xiao Xian had imagined. However, because of this unprecedented power, Xiao Xian had to bear more pressure. Although he could still run and jump, the pain in his muscles was very clear. He could do it again, but only once. If he really did it a third time with the same power, he wouldn't even be able to run. Will the people from Royal City continue to chase us? Duo Kong asked. Yes, but they won't move immediately. Let's take advantage of this time to hurry. Otherwise, the situation will be even worse. I'm guessing that there are reinforcements from Royal City, Xiao Xian said. Reinforcements? It wasn't just Zheng, Cheng, and Duo Kong. The others didn't understand either. Just for the Yinjiao tribe. Why would the people from Royal City spend so much effort to kill them? They wouldn't believe that it was just for the salt and fire crystals. Because until now, the people from Royal City hadn't even mentioned the salt and fire crystals. They attacked as soon as they saw them, and it was so murderous that it seemed like they didn't want to give them any chance of survival. Anyway, let's hurry, Xiao Xian said. They, who were at the back, kept a distance from the rest of the tribe to prevent the people from Royal City from chasing after them. After entering the semi-desert, there were fewer people and fewer threats. They only needed to guard against the people from Royal City. The small tribes in the desert could be taken care of by the people in front of them. Seeing the people from Yinjiao leave, the people from Royal City didn't give the order to chase after them. Instead, they rested where they were. How long until the people from Chaoqiu City and Feng City arrive? Yizong asked the people next to him. Soon, at most 2 days. If they're fast, they'll be here before tomorrow night. A young man with the word Chao embroidered on his clothes said. The Yinjiao people are really strong. They're a big threat, especially that Xiao Xian. It's better to kill people like him. Indeed, if we let them go, I'm worried that they'll become the second thorn in our side. Yizong muttered as he looked in the direction the Yinjiao people had left. The young man from the Chao family had good hearing. His ears twitched, and he caught the key words in Yizong's words. Second thorn. Chaoqiu City was the furthest away from Royal City. He hadn't expected to be found this time, so he had followed the main group here. The others had followed behind, hoping to get a share of the loot. To him, salt and fire crystals were very attractive. He had always thought that the others had the same idea as him, but now it seemed that things weren't that simple. The Chao family of Chaoqiu had been one of the 6 major tribes back in the day. They didn't care much about other things. Other than those who stayed in Royal City, the rest of them stayed in Chaoqiu City, guarding their own land. From time to time, they would exploit the small tribes nearby to fill their warehouses. They had heard a little about the Yinjiao tribe. So, there's still the first thorn? Who's the first thorn? The young man from the Chao family asked. The others, including the girl in leather armor from the Ji family, walked over. They had never heard of this before. Who was the first thorn? Yizong kept his mouth shut. There were some things he couldn't let others know. If he hadn't become a core member of the Yi family, due to his talent and strength, he wouldn't have known these secrets. The girl in leather armor looked around, then pulled Yizong to the side. Hey, Ji Lu, where are you taking Yizong? Someone shouted from behind. Ji Lu, who was wearing leather armor, ignored the people behind her. She was a descendant of the royal Ji family. Her grandfather was the current king, and her father was the eldest son of the king. He was likely to inherit the throne in the future. Hence, her status was relatively high, and she had the right to know many things. Tell me, it's just the 2 of us. What do you mean by the first thorn and the second thorn? The girl in leather armor asked. Yizong thought for a moment. Do you know what happened in Royal City 1,000 years ago? 1,000 years ago? Ji Lu didn't expect Yizong to bring up something so long ago. However, because they were going against the Yinjiao, she had heard much about it. She had looked through her ancestors' records and knew that the Yinjiao people had indeed appeared 1,000 years ago. I only know that 1,000 years ago, the Yinjiao tribe came from the other side of the sea. Some people left here too, Ji Lu said. In that case, do you know who those people that left were? I don't know. I asked my father, but he wouldn't tell me. Yizong looked in the direction the Yinjiao tribe had left. Most of the people who left were expelled from Royal City. Two of them were very important. One was Mu Han from the Mu family. The other was Yi Xiong from the Yi family. Mu Han, Yi Xiong. Jilu didn't recognize these two names. Yizong continued. If Mu Han had won the competition, the Mu family wouldn't be what it is now. I heard that Mu Han lost the competition and was expelled from Royal City. What about Yi Xiong? Yi Xiong. In the Yi family's records, he was called inauspicious. Ever since he was born, the Yi family's ancestors had seen him as an inauspicious person who would bring disaster to the Yi family. Unfortunately, Yi Xiong was always able to avoid disaster and survive. On the other hand, those who were in conflict with him were met with disaster. When the royal city fell into civil war, the Yi family wanted to execute Yi Xiong in secret. Unfortunately, he suddenly disappeared. When Yizong had first heard about Yi Xiong, he had lamented that such a genius would be considered inauspicious. Back then, Yi Xiong had mastered many ancient divination techniques. One of them was the now extinct technique of not divination. Since then, no one had truly mastered it. It was a pity that such a genius was gone. When the royal city fell into civil war, many were executed and many escaped. I heard that they all left with Mu Han. Yi Xiong might have left with them too. When the royal city finally calmed down and realized what had happened, the passage in the sea had already sunk. Coincidentally, the Yinjiao appeared. The royal city had targeted them before, but due to the civil war, the royal city was unstable internally. They didn't immediately attack the Yinjiao, but they spread rumors to encourage others to target the Yinjiao. Later, the Yinjiao retreated into the mountains and disappeared from sight. Gradually, they were forgotten. I see. Ji Lu sighed. She was wondering why the 6 noble families had targeted the Yinjiao tribes because of the Fox incident and the Royal City Gate incident. These were just 2 of the reasons. Then why didn't they do it earlier? Asked Ji Lu. First, they often hide in the mountains and rarely appear in the royal city. Second, the people of the royal city don't want to act rashly. If it had been 1,000 years ago, the nobles of the royal city would have acted long ago. But after thousands of years, the people of the 6 noble families had changed. No one wanted to cause trouble. They only wanted to secure their positions and reap their benefits. If it weren't for the Yi family and the Mu family's constant warnings, they would have forgotten about the threat that had slipped away. Every few decades, when Yinjiao tribes enter the royal city, the conflicts were mostly between the Yi family and the Mu family. Ji Lu thought about the behavior of the people of the royal city. Indeed, it didn't seem right. But then again, it's been so many years. Mu Han and the Yi family's misfortune should have been buried long ago, right? Unless they become like the Beast King. That's what the Yi family is worried about. Mu Han may have died a long time ago, but who knows if he has any descendants. After all, Mu Han left with a vengeance. He said he would come back for revenge. If he couldn't do it himself, he would let his descendants do it. As for Yi Xiong, he may still be alive. Perhaps he's using some secret method to survive. Everyone in the royal city knew about the Yi family's prophecy. The world will be divided after a long time, but the world will be united after a long time. But that was only half the truth. Other than the Yi family, no one else knew about the other half. The other half was a reminder to the Yi family that the misfortune was still around. Rather than the royal city attacking the Yinjiao tribe, it was more accurate to say that the Yi family and the Mu family were attacking them. The Yi family was the main driving force behind this. It was a rare opportunity. They had used the incident with the Fox tribe and the City Gate incident to persuade others to agree to send out troops. Even the method of spreading rumors and using others to do the dirty work was similar to 1,000 years ago. The other young masters of the royal city had come with the intention of fooling around. But Yizong had come with a mission, to find out if the Yinjiao people really had the ability to see the future. What was this ability? Did it have anything to do with Yi Xiong? If it did, the Yi family would do whatever it took to wipe out Yinjiao. Mu Han and Yi Xiong had been a thorn in the side of the royal city's 6 aristocrats. Were the Yinjiao going to become a second thorn in their side? If they didn't remove this thorn, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. But why are the Yin Jiao people heading that way? That's not a good place to live. Ji Lu pulled out a simple map. If we keep going that way, we'll reach the edge soon. If we join forces with the people behind us, we can force them to jump into the sea. Xiao Xian is powerful, but I don't think he can maintain his power forever. When he heard the words, jump into the sea, Yizong's eyelids twitched. He had a bad feeling about this. Chapter 490. On the Royal City team's side, the beast carriages were damaged by the rocks. Before Chaoqiu City and Feng City's people arrived, they would fix the carriages and continue their journey. I don't believe we can't beat them with our manpower. Even though they had seen Xiao Xian's kick, Yizong and Ji Lu had both said that the Yin Jiao people couldn't maintain their momentum forever. They would eventually find a chance to attack. Moreover, in front of them was a semi-desert, and beyond that was the sea. They had more people on their side, and the Yin Jiao people were destined to be cornered. Thinking of this, the team that had just experienced a setback was reinvigorated. As for the Yin Jiao team that had entered the semi-desert, they didn't use water directly from their canteens. Instead, they took water from the tall cactus pillars. After a cold winter, although some of the cactus pillars had frozen to death, most of them had survived. During the melting snow, they had absorbed plenty of water, and each one looked sturdy and strong. Yin Jiao people rarely ventured into dry areas like this. They had always lived in the mountains and didn't lack water, but they would have to endure more in the future. They had to get used to the desert. Xiao Xian and the rest followed behind, sending a few warriors to catch up with the team in front to explain the situation. Therefore, the Yin Jiao team at the front wasn't too worried. There were depressions in the ground where water had accumulated. The soil was still moist, and there were weeds growing. There were tribesmen living nearby, and when they saw the Yin Jiao team, they kept their distance. Their eyes were alert and curious. They had never seen such a situation before. They couldn't understand why such a large tribe would migrate here. Did they want to settle down here? There were already few resources, and with more people, wouldn't the competition be even greater? As the days passed, Xiao Xian saw the bird in the sky again. He knew that it was checking the position of the Yin Jiao team. Behind them, the Royal City team was still chasing after them. They would not give up so easily. At most, they would be more cautious in their pursuit this time. Xiao Xian also saw the people of the Maka tribe, but he was not familiar with those people. He did not see Wanfu, and those people were very alert, so Xiao Xian did not go over to say hello. The tribe's route would deviate from the tribe's habitat in this semi-desert area to prevent unnecessary conflicts. The temperature was rising quickly, and this place was dry, so when Xiao Xian saw the familiar fog, he told the tribesmen to quickly collect dew. It was rare for them to encounter such good luck, otherwise they would have to endure the thirst later. As he walked through the fog, Xiao Xian smelled the scent of seawater and heard the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The sea is in front. Xiangchen had been here several times and was familiar with this place. Since they had reached the end, what to do next could only depend on the shaman. The shaman said that the ancestors came from here, but now they wanted to go back. What kind of method could they use? Swim? I'll make a few big ships. There are not enough trees around to make a ship. There was no change under the sea. Unlike when Xiao Xian came, there was no passage for them to go through. A group of people gathered on the coast. People who had never seen the sea looked at it with curiosity and bewilderment. It turned out that the sea looked like this. It turned out that the sea was so big, much bigger than they imagined. However, how could they cross such a sea that they could not see the other side? It was also the shaman's first time here. Looking at the endless sea, the shaman just let everyone rest for a while and then went to find Xiao Xian. Now Xiao Xian and the others who were at the back had followed the team. When they saw the shaman coming, he said, "I'll go down first." Xiao Xian took off his animal skin bag and walked into the sea, swimming towards the depths. Below the surface of the water, there was a steep slope. The stone path was not far below. As he continued diving, Xiao Xian saw the stone path. All kinds of seaweed grew on the stone path. Many small fish swam around it, catching the small creatures on the seaweed. Seeing this, Xiao Xian knew that this stone path hadn't had a hollow for a long time. Feeling the familiar pulling force, Xiao Xian held his breath, sank to the stone path, and stood on it. When the fish saw Xiao Xian, they scattered in panic. There was too much seaweed under his feet, and Xiao Xian felt it was slippery. However, this was not the time to observe this. The surroundings were dark, and the light from above was not bright. But soon, Xiao Xian saw a flash of light. It was a fiery red light, and the source of the light was himself. On the 4 bone ornaments, each bead emitted a fiery red light. The light spots flickered, and then a small flame sprang out. It was not extinguished by the seawater. It swayed as if it was on land and was not affected by the surrounding seawater. Then, the fire suddenly spread like a switch. At first, it was only around Xiao Xian, but soon the flames in the water spread along the stone path under Xiao Xian's feet. Xiao Xian held the fire crystal in his hand. When he needed to borrow a large amount of power from his ancestors, he always prepared 1 or 2 fire crystals. Previously, when he faced the royal city team, he used 1 fire crystal. Now, although he did not know what his ancestors had instructed him to do in his dream, he only brought the fire crystal as a backup. Unexpectedly, the flames emitted by the 4 bone ornaments were not under Xiao Xian's control at all. It was as if they were conscious and spontaneous. Under the dark sea, along the stone path full of seaweed, a fire dragon covered it. For a moment, the stone path looked like it was on fire. The surrounding fish avoided it and swam around curiously. When the flames on the stone path spread for a while, they suddenly rushed upward. On the shore, the Yinjiao people who were waiting anxiously saw the flames rushing up from the bottom of the sea. There was fire in the water? How could it be? But now everything they saw was real. The flames really did come from the bottom of the sea, and the changes continued. After the flames rushed out of the sea, it was like a sharp knife cutting through the sea. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the flames in the sea pushed the waves forward. It was so dazzling. The sea breeze suddenly became violent and blew toward the shore. There seemed to be some flickering flames in the air. White waves rolled on the blue surface of the sea. They were parted by the surging flames, revealing the stone path below. On the stone path, full of seaweed, there were some marine animals hiding in the seaweed. They wriggled their bodies and fled to the sides of the stone path, sliding into the walls of the sea on both sides. Xiao Xian stood on the stone path, full of seaweed, looking at the broken surface of the sea in a daze. He knew the ancestors' hint in the dream was to go this way, but he didn't think it would be in such a forceful way. There was no hole in the stone path, no passage. Then he would make one. If there was no way to go, then he would make it a passageway. The Yinjiao people on the shore looked at the changes in the sea in shock. Looking at the long, narrow passageway in the sea, they were even more shocked than when they saw the flame giant. The shamanists knelt down in front of the hole in the sea. They were grateful for everything the ancestor had done for them. They were grateful that the ancestor had given them a chance to go back. Then Chief Zheng Luo, hunting team leader Duo Kong, and the others all knelt down. The bird in the sky cried out in alarm and turned around to fly back. "There's no time, let's go." Zheng Luo turned and shouted, "Everyone, follow me." Zheng Luo and the shamanists walked at the front of the group, heading into the sea. More than 4,000 people lined up in a long line, following the shamanists and the chief into the sea. If someone didn't know what was going on, they would probably think it was a mass suicide. When everyone stepped onto the stone path full of seaweed, as the last 2 people stepped in, the flames behind them retracted, and the split seawater gathered back together. Walking on such a long stone path with no end in sight, the sea walls on both sides grew taller and taller. Everyone was nervous. Through the flames, they looked inside the sea walls and saw schools of fish swimming in the sea. When they got close, they suddenly turned around and left. Giant fish swam from the bottom of the stone path, from the depths of the sea. Walking on the stone path, they could see its blurry silhouette. At the closest point, They could even see the faint stripes on its body. Young children looked at the walls of the sea that were coated with a layer of fire. They nervously grabbed the corner of their father's clothes, almost falling because of the slippery seaweed under their feet. Xiao Xian suppressed his shock and continued forward. Behind him, the long line of people followed, gradually leaving the shore. Near the shore, the sea had returned to its original state, without any trace of the split water. Rumble, Royal City, Chaoqiu City, and Feng City's groups were all heading this way. The closer they got to the shore, the more confused they became. Where were the Yinjiao people? Weren't they all heading this way? Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that they could turn into fish? Where did they go? What's wrong with the people in front? Why aren't they continuing? In the carriage, Ji Lu pulled the curtain aside and shouted, "Young master, in front, in front." The person reporting from the front stuttered, unable to speak clearly. Ji Lu waved his hand angrily and jumped off the carriage to take a look. Yizong's eyelids twitched, the ominous feeling growing stronger. He also jumped off the carriage and strode forward. Standing on higher ground, they looked at the sea. Not far from the shore, there was a long opening. They could even see people walking through the opening, and that crack was still moving into the distance. The person standing on a giant beast almost fell off the beast when he saw the scene in the sea. What is that? Someone tell me what that is." Ji Lu pointed at the sea and roared. "Walking in the sea? How is that possible? How is that possible?" Yizong closed his eyes, his hands still trembling. He regretted it now. He should have ordered his men to chase after them and kill them before they entered the sea at all costs. But it was too late to regret now. It was already too late. 1,000 years ago, Mu Han and the others had caused internal strife in Royal City and left with their people. The Yinjiao people had come from the other side of the sea. Now, the Yinjiao people were returning from here. Would the people who had left come from there? Xiao Xian turned back to look at the shore. From where he was, he could see the people standing on the backs of the beasts. After leaving, Xiao Xian had a feeling that this was not an eternal farewell. He would come back again. As Xiao Xian led the Yinjiao team along the stone path on the other side of the sea in the fearsome Beast Mountain Forest, the shamaness stood by the fire pit, looking at the flames that had suddenly risen. She gave an order. Half a day later, a 1,000-man team, led by 7 fearsome beasts, emerged from the forest. Chapter 491. Among the 7 ferocious beasts, several of them had never shown their faces in public, except when the tribe was migrating. This was the first time they came out of the ferocious beast forest, so they were very excited. The ferocious beasts living in the ferocious beast forest, even if they lived with human beings, were still ferocious. When they looked at people or things, they even made people feel a flash of cold light. Most of the 1,000 people who came out of the ferocious beast forest were intermediate and senior totem warriors, which puzzled people who saw them. The Wanshi tribe, which was closest to the Yinjiao tribe, had been paying close attention to the situation of the Yinjiao tribe. When they saw the ferocious beasts in the team, they were shocked. No wonder none of the Wanshi beasts they sent came back. They might not have been killed by the Yinjiao people, but they might have been eaten by the Yinjiao ferocious beasts. The people who were monitoring near the ferocious beasts forest often heard the strange cries of the ferocious beasts. They used to take pleasure in other people's misfortune, thinking that the Yinjiao people must have encountered the ferocious beasts in the forest. Now when they saw these beasts, they knew that it was not them who encountered trouble, but the ferocious beasts raised by their tribe. Do you think there are any other ferocious beasts in the Yinjiao tribe besides these beasts? A man of the Wanshi tribe who was monitoring the ferocious beast forest asked his companion next to him. "I don't know. They live in a forest full of ferocious beasts. Who knows if they have other ferocious beasts?" No matter whether the Yinjiao people had other ferocious beasts or not, if the chief ordered them to take this opportunity to attack the Yinjiao tribe, he would definitely hide behind the team. It was safer that way. But look at the Yinjiao people who went out in a hurry. What on earth happened to make them so anxious? Another man of the Wanshi tribe said. He just accidentally exposed his position. If it was in the past, the Yinjiao people would definitely chase after him. But this time, he just ran 2 steps and found that the Yinjiao people didn't mean to stop at all. They didn't even look at him. It's really strange. I thought the Yinjiao people were going to fight with us. I was so scared. Don't think too much. Let's go back and report to the leader first. Not only were the people of the Wanshe tribe full of doubts, but the Yinjiao team was hard to ignore. Moreover, after leaving the forest, this team seemed to be going straight to their target. Except for a short rest and exchanging food with other tribes on the way, they did nothing else. The robbers didn't dare to make a move on this team. Some travel teams even went over to talk to them during their break, hoping to get some information. Unfortunately, the people in this team didn't care about them at all. Yinjiao's team was guarded against by all the tribes they passed by, but they simply ignored them. They only had one goal now, and that was the desert. What are the Yinjiao people trying to do? The Mang tribesmen who received the news were bewildered. Because of Xiao Xian's disappearance in the desert 2 years ago, the Yinjiao people had lost contact with the other tribes. Later, when several tribes organized to go to the desert, they didn't call the Yinjiao people. But now, what do the Yinjiao people want? In the past 2 years, the Yinjiao tribe had been very low-key. Other than sending people to the desert from time to time, they didn't do anything else that attracted attention. But now, the Yinjiao tribe, which had been low-key for 2 years, was acting so ostentatiously. And the leader was the Yinjiao leader, Ao. What were they trying to do? Were they finally going to attack a tribe? Every tribe who received the news was paying attention to Yinjiao's movements. Even if they didn't take the Yinjiao people seriously before, after seeing this team, they stopped looking down on them. Until they received news that the Yinjiao team was heading in a certain direction, and that direction led to the desert. Were the Yinjiao people going to war with the slave masters? Some people were worried, some mocked, and some just wanted to watch the show. Ao didn't care about other people's gazes and discussions. He led the team straight to the desert. It had been many days since he left the fearsome beast forest, but he still couldn't calm down. That day, the fire seed in the fire pit suddenly surged without any ceremony or anyone by the fire pit. The shaman stood by the fire pit for a while, then gave the order. The shaman told them 2 things. 1. Xiao Xian was coming back. 2. There might be more than one person coming back. The incomplete fire seed is about to become complete. The shaman's words set off a storm in Ao's heart. Even now, thinking about it made him tremble with excitement. For so many years, generation after generation, how many Yinjiao ancestors had died with hatred? Ao never thought that he would encounter so many things during his time as the leader. Whether it was returning to the old land or the other half of the fire seed, it was enough to make every Yinjiao person ecstatic. In the future, he would be able to meet his ancestors with satisfaction. The other half of the fire seed. Could it be that Xian went missing to find the other half of the fire seed? How many people came back with Xian? Pack up, we're going to the desert today. Ao turned to the others in the team, and then looked at Caesar, who was lying on the ground. Can you detect Xian's presence? Caesar shook his head slightly. The distance was too far. It seemed to be in that direction, but he wasn't sure. However, he sensed that there was another strange guy in the desert. Seeing Caesar staring in the direction of the desert, Ao didn't care. He didn't think much about it. He got up and asked Hua, who was more familiar with the surrounding area. Then he led the team to the Rain tribe to get some food and water. Now, Yang Sui was almost in charge of the Rain tribe. Why? Because he could ask for rain. The people of the Rain tribe now worshipped Yang Sui like a treasure. Even the chief status was far lower than his. In the past 2 years, every time the Yinjiao people came to the desert, they would rest in the Rain tribe for 2 days. So Yang Sui also knew that Xiao Xian was missing. When he heard that the Yinjiao people were going to the desert to find Xiao Xian, Yang Sui was very happy. He also lent several rainstones to the Yinjiao people. The desert was too hot and dry. The rainstones could condense water and make the Yinjiao people feel better. Not to mention the warriors in the team, the ferocious beasts didn't seem to live in dry areas. They might not be able to adapt to the desert environment. The high-quality rainstones were very precious. Yang Sui lent several of them. If the Yin Jiao people took them away and didn't return them, the people of the Rain Tribe would cry to death. If it were other people who did this, the people of the Rain Tribe would never agree. However, it was Yang Sui who lent the rainstones. He was the shaman, so he had to continue supporting him. Yang Sui was grateful to Xiao Xian. He knew that the matter of praying for rain had something to do with Xiao Xian. Now, he could help the Yin Jiao people, which was also a kind of gratitude. Yang Sui originally wanted to lend some camels to the Yin Jiao people, but Ao refused. He thought camels were too slow, and there were not many camels here. The woman next to Yang Sui became nervous when she heard that he wanted to borrow camels. Besides, they were in a hurry this time. There were nearly 1,000 people in Ao's team, and only a dozen camels were not enough to share. If they encountered those crazy slaves in the desert, they might not be able to protect all the camels. Not long after staying in the Rain Tribe, Ao led the team into the desert. Most of the Yin Jiao people had never been to such a place. At first, they were not used to it. Fortunately, they were strong and got used to it after a few days. However, several ferocious beasts in the team had thick fur and were not in a good state of mind. I didn't expect the desert to be so hot. Mao wiped the sweat from his forehead. It was Lei and Tuo who brought people to the desert several times before. He had never been here. Now, even CEO was about to become a roasted pig, let alone himself. Fortunately, the Rain Tribe shaman gave us these rain stones. Otherwise, the situation would be more difficult. Tuo looked around. He could only judge the direction according to the sun. The sand dunes in the desert were always changing. Even if he had been here several times, he could not identify the location according to the appearance of the sand dunes. The best thing is to find a place to rest first and continue when it's dark. Ao thought so too, but before he could say anything, Caesar, who had been quiet all this while, seemed to have noticed something and looked around vigilantly. "What's wrong?" Ao asked. The other ferocious beasts were not abnormal. Anyway, it was always good to be careful. Ao made a gesture behind him. The originally dispirited people quickly adjusted their state and became alert. Along the way, they had encountered some scattered forces harassing them. They had also been attacked by ferocious beasts in the desert. But this was the first time that only Caesar noticed it and the others did not respond. But soon, the other ferocious beasts began to become restless and alert. For a moment, only the low growls of the ferocious beasts could be heard. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of flowing sand was heard. Small black dots appeared in everyone's vision. Moreover, these black dots were increasing rapidly, fighting to emerge from under the sand. Oh no, it's the insect tide. Why is there an insect tide here? Everyone be careful. Ao raised the stone knife in his hand and shouted. As soon as he turned his head, he saw Caesar running to the front. When Ao led the people into the desert, Xiao Xian and the rest were still walking in the sea. Every step Xiao Xian took, the seawater in front of him would be split open. At the same time, the same length of the stone path behind the team would be submerged by the seawater. These days, they had been eating the dried meat and grains that they had prepared beforehand. The main thing was the 1,000-grain gold that they had harvested last year. The 1,000-grain gold was very filling. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. They drank the water stored in the pot, and the water condensed by Xiao Xian's rainstone. Sometimes they would catch some creatures that lived in the seaweed. They would catch them before they escaped and eat what they could. Even though the water and food they brought could barely support such a large team, everyone became very weak after a long time. Some of the children's faces were now sunken. Hold on, we're almost there. Chapter 492. The further they walked, the clearer Xiao Xian could feel the bone ornament's power weakening. In the beginning, the water kept a distance from them. As the water grew closer, they had no choice but to cut in and squeeze. It was their first time leaving the place they'd lived in for so long. It was their first time walking on such a strange stone path. After the initial novelty, all that was left was anxiety. They were afraid of the tall walls on both sides. They were worried that the bone ornaments would run out of power. They were worried that the water would crash down and drown them. It was only here that they realized how small they were. Of course, there was also uncertainty about the future. There were many people in the group. They did the same thing every day. They were used to it. But what about the future? They didn't know what it would be like. But as long as the tribe existed, everyone would be together. Even if they had to die together, they were willing. Xiao Xian looked up ahead. Although all he saw was water, he could feel a familiar presence. The first slave, the blue beetle, was there. Other than that, there was another. The smile in Xiao Xian's eyes grew deeper. Soon. Don't worry, someone's here to get us, said Xiao Xian. He sensed Caesar's presence. Compared to Sapphire's beetle, Caesar's connection with Xiao Xian was weaker. If he wasn't close enough, he wouldn't have sensed him. In other words, Caesar was waiting at the other end of the stone path. Since Caesar was here, there must be other Yinjiao people. The shamaness and Caesar wouldn't let Caesar come alone. Xiao Xian told the shamaness, Zheng Luo, and the rest about what he sensed. Everyone perked up at the news. What were they worried about? They wouldn't accept it. They'd learned a lot of Yinjiao's secrets along the way. They knew that there was another Yinjiao tribe on the other side of the sea. The two tribes used to be one, but something happened 1,000 years ago, and they separated. Now, they were going to merge into a whole Yinjiao. As they got closer and closer to the target point, the sea walls on both sides also had obvious changes. The sea walls were gradually lowering, and the entire stone path was actually concave in an arc. Therefore, the closer they were to the sea, the lower the sea walls on both sides would naturally be. As the walls lowered, Yang Guang made the path much brighter. The bone ornament's power was still weakening. On the stone path, the first half of the path was the bone ornament's own power. When it could no longer support itself, if there was no power to take over, the space it created would become smaller and smaller. The water on both sides would come closer and closer, and eventually, someone in the group would be drowned. Xiao Xian knew that the ancestors could only help them so far. They had to rely on themselves. Since he'd brought so many people into the sea, Xiao Xian had to bring them out too. He took out a fire crystal. Just like how he pushed snow in the snow, he imitated the ornament's actions to push down the parts it couldn't support. It took a lot of energy to hold on. Xiao Xian couldn't do it on his own. He had to rely on the fire crystals. This was why he always carried them with him. So, when the last person in the group was prepared to be submerged, he realized that the water that touched his heels had moved away from him, maintaining a distance of half a step. Knowing what Xiao Xian was doing, the shamaness took out a bag of fire crystals and gave it to him. She was still being carried, or she wouldn't be able to keep up with the group's speed. She couldn't move freely, so she had to rely on Zheng Luo to pass the crystals. When Xiao Xian used up a fire crystal, Zheng Luo handed him another. At the other end of the stone path, above the cliff, Yinjiao's team had already arrived. They were shocked when they encountered the insect swarm. They didn't expect that the giant insect would bring Caesar here. Of course, the team followed them here. This is where Xian fell. Gigu asked. There were two team leaders in the tribe, Gigu and Ta. One of them had to stay behind to guard the tribe. In the end, because Gigu had a bird that could scout in the sky, he could come out with the team. Ta stayed behind to guard the tribe. Cha-Cha had disappeared for a long time. No one could find it. Now, the only one in the tribe that could scout was Gigu's snow-white falcon. It should be here. Ao thought of how Xiao Xian had been forced to jump down from here. He was furious. But now there was no Snowfield City, no Fire Hill City, only Rock Hill City. The Jinjiawi of Snowfield City were all slaughtered. Then we'll wait here, Gigu asked. Ao looked at Caesar, who was squatting next to the cliff, and said, "Let's wait here." Caesar looked in the direction of the sea. Would Xiao Xian come out of the sea? Ao and others were puzzled. They could only wait here. If there was a chance, they would climb down the cliff and spear a few fish. If there were giant fish, they would not dare to go into the water. They dared to provoke the giant beasts in the forest, but they did not dare to provoke the ones in the water. Their swimming skills were not as good as the fish. Day by day, they did not see a person jump out of the sea. Until one day, Caesar suddenly howled towards the sea. The people who were skinning the fish immediately dropped the things in their hands and came to the edge of the cliff to look into the distance. Look, what is that? Is it a fire? Nonsense. How can there be fire in the sea? Hey, it seems to be true. All the people in the team came to the edge of the cliff and stood in a long row along the edge of the cliff. Why is there a fire in the sea? Is it made by Xian? Gigu wondered. On the blue sea, the fire was too conspicuous. It was obviously not the light reflected by the sun. It was moving. Caesar next to him howled again, his 4 feet impatiently stepping on the ground. He wanted to go over, but unfortunately he could not fly, so he could only stand here and worry. Is there someone down there? As the fire on the sea got closer and closer, they saw something moving under the narrow gap with the fire. Not only that, everyone in the Flaming Horn tribe felt a stronger and stronger feeling. They could feel the totemic flame in their minds. When they were not in battle, the totemic flame was unusually active, as if it was waiting for something good to happen. They could clearly feel this feeling, as if a missing part of their body was about to be filled with excitement and anticipation. Thinking of the shaman's words when they set off, and connecting it with the feeling now, Ao's heart beat faster and faster. His clenched hands were full of sweat, and he stretched his neck to look at the sea. Ao, Gigu, and the others were staring at the fire on the sea. They were so engrossed in it that they did not notice that something was approaching them from behind. A few soldiers were bumped into and impatiently turned back with their elbows. "Why are you bumping into me? I'm looking. Don't knock me down," the soldier said as he felt something was wrong. It seemed that something was blocking the light. He turned his head and saw a big lump. Facing such a big beetle, the muscles on the soldier's face twitched, and he moved to the side. The other soldiers in front of him hurriedly made way for it. Although they were not afraid of such a giant beast, they had hunted many ferocious beasts that were bigger than this insect in the forest. However, this was different. This was the leader of the insect army. If they accidentally angered it, they did not know if it would let its insect army sweep over. It was not a good thing to encounter an insect army in the desert. The big blue beetle stood on the edge of the cliff and looked ahead. Then, with a puff, it opened its wings. The people standing in a row along the cliff glanced at the big blue beetle. They saw it flapping its wings and flying towards a fire on the sea. The Yinjiao people were speechless. "Damn it, this thing can fly." Gigu thought for a while and let his white falcon fly over to take a look. Xiao Xian was holding on, trying his best to control the opening of the stone path. Even with the fire crystals, he still needed to expend a lot of energy. Now he was almost exhausted, and his muscles were aching. However, the shore was right in front of him. He could even smell the subtle sand and dust in the air. Sensing something, Xiao Xian did not have time to wipe his sweat. He looked up at the sky. The people in the team also heard the flapping of wings and looked up. Seeing the familiar big blue lump rolling over, Xiao Xian smiled. "Long time no see, Sapphire." Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Zheng Luo motioned for the people behind to stay put. The people in the team saw the big blue bug fly down, following right above Xiao Xian's head. There was a bird call in the sky. It was not Cha-Cha's voice, but Gigu's white falcon. Since it was here, then Gigu and the others must be here too. Xiao Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He threw away the white powder in his hand and gestured for Zheng Luo to pass him another one. "We're here. There's only a short stretch left. Everyone, hold on. Our brothers will come to support us." Saying this, Xiao Xian asked the people in the team to let Sapphire bring the elderly and children who could not hold on any longer to shore. Zheng Luo picked 3 people first, 1 elderly and 2 children. They were not in good condition. They were sick and had been carried on someone's back. They were unconscious now. Receiving Xiao Xian's orders, Sapphire grabbed the 3 people. Its first reaction was to wrap them up into a ball and bring them away. But then it thought these were living people. It was its first time carrying living people. Seeing Sapphire take them away, the people in the team relaxed. They also felt a sense of familiarity that could not be ignored. It was like a blood connection. On the cliff, Ao had already seen the people. He ordered the people who brought Sapphire back to take care of them. "Where's the rope?" "Prepare the straw rope." Ao shouted. "Chief, we don't have enough rope. We used it when we were catching fish." Ao thought for a moment and looked around. His gaze fell on the animal skin clothes tied around his waist. It was too hot during the day, so most of them were topless. When a night turned cold, they would wear the clothes. Now he took off the clothes. "No rope." "Then use this." If one piece of clothing was not enough, would 1,000 pieces not be enough? Their animal skins were all made from fearsome beast skin. They were tough and would not break easily. Ao rubbed his red eyes as he put on the animal skin coat. Why did he suddenly want to cry? The flames in the sea were getting closer and closer to shore. The people on the stone path could already see the people standing on the cliff. "Hello, my long-lost brother." Chapter 493. It had to be said that the way Xiao Xian brought this group of people back far exceeded Ao's expectations. But at this point, they no longer cared how these people came back. They only knew that these people were one with their tribe. The feeling of the totemic flame confirmed this. When Xiao Xian supported the crack to the edge of the cliff, Ao jumped into the sea with his people. They didn't even think about whether there were giant aquatic beasts in the water. The flame that could split the surface of the sea did not stop the Yinjiao people. Those who jumped into the sea could directly enter the crack and stand on the stone path. But at this point, Xiao Xian was almost at his limit. "I can't hold on for much longer. You guys take those who can't move up first." Xiao Xian turned to Zheng Luo. "Take the people in the team and follow them. They're all on the same side." Zheng Luo smiled and nodded. "I know. We're all Yinjiao." He walked towards Ao, who was the first to come in. "Yinjiao Zheng Luo. Yinjiao Ao." The two branch chiefs extended their arms and hugged each other warmly, then thumped each other's shoulders. This was a way of showing friendliness in the tribe. Ao glanced at the team behind Xiao Xian. Suppressing his excitement, he said, "We'll take those who are injured, sick, or weak up first. Those who still have energy can climb up using the ropes we threw down. There will be people up there to receive them." Knowing that they were on the same side, the team on the stone path did not reject them or raise their guard. They handed over the injured and quickly climbed up using the ropes made of animal skin. Even those who were exhausted and on the verge of fainting from hunger and thirst tried their best to stay awake. They had reached their destination, and there would be people to receive them. They didn't have to worry about anything. They just had to climb up. Xiao Xian had to stay behind. After all, he had to support the crack. Only after the others left could he withdraw the power to part the water and leave. After walking in the sea for so long, not to mention the others, even Xiao Xian felt thirsty and hungry. His mouth was dry and cracked. "Drink some water first." Ao took out his water bottle. There was still some water left in it, and he gave all to Xiao Xian. After drinking some water, Xiao Xian finally felt a little better, but the feeling of hunger was even more obvious. He was planning to have a good meal when he got back. Looking up at the cliff, there were people climbing up with people on their backs. There were also experienced rock climbers with one person on their back and one in their hand. There were also people who climbed up with only one hand and two legs. The 10 colorful ropes were put down. At first, the people at the top let the people below climb up. Later, they found that it was too slow, so they connected 2 of the ropes end to end and formed a circle. Then, they lowered the ropes. There were people at the top of the cliff pulling. Every time one side was pulled up, the other side would lower the same length. It was like a conveyor belt for transporting goods. One side would send the goods up and then unload them at the top. The empty conveyor belt would be lowered from the other side, waiting for the next batch of goods to be delivered. Therefore, the people below could be pulled up as long as they grabbed onto the ropes. Those who couldn't even grab onto the ropes were tied to the top and pulled up. It was indeed a good idea. The animal skin clothes and pants were also wear-resistant. They wouldn't break after being rubbed against the rock. At least, they could support the people pulling up. Seeing that this method was quite efficient and could save the people below, the other ropes were tied up and pulled up in the same way. On the stone path, as the number of people decreased, the cracks also shrank. The smaller the cracks, the more energy Xiao Xian could save. After the other people in the team left with the ropes, Xiao Xian withdrew the power that was supporting the bone ornaments and grabbed onto the ropes. There was no more power to separate the water. The walls on both sides of the cliff collapsed and gathered together. The water splashed all over Xiao Xian. Fortunately, the rope was pulled up quickly. Xiao Xian wasn't drowned by the water. As Xiao Xian was pulled up, he saw a row of people standing along the edge of the cliff. There were also a few familiar beast heads. It felt like a day had passed, as if he hadn't left for the past 2 years. "I'm back." Seeing Xiao Xian, everyone was very excited. Many people wanted to give Xiao Xian a warm hug. Unfortunately, as soon as Xiao Xian came up, the others were pushed aside by Caesar. When Xiao Xian left the fearsome beast forest and came to the desert, he didn't bring Caesar with him. This guy was actually quite resentful. However, seeing Xiao Xian, he was very excited. He lowered his big wolf head and kept rubbing against Xiao Xian. "Long time no see, old friend." Caesar had been with Xiao Xian the longest. Xiao Xian had watched him grow from an ordinary wolf cub to what he was today. It was indeed not easy. Thinking about it, more than 10 years had passed. Xiao Xian greeted everyone one by one and asked about the condition of the injured members. Hearing that their conditions had stabilized and their lives were not in danger for the time being, Xiao Xian was relieved. "Leader, why are you here?" Xiao Xian asked Ao. "The shaman told us to come here. However, after coming to the desert, we met this." Ao pointed to the big beetle that was excitedly kicking its hind legs and told them what had happened. When they saw Caesar running towards the insect tide, they were really scared. They thought that Caesar was going to fight with the big beetle. Even without the big beetle, facing such a large army of insects would not be easy. However, what happened next was beyond their expectations. The insect tide actually opened a path for Caesar. Then Caesar followed the big beetle and ran towards them. The team naturally followed behind. "Good job." Xiao Xian patted the big blue beetle that was now more than 2 meters tall on its back. Just like the little bug that could be crushed with one finger back then, by chance, it became Xiao Xian's first slave. Thinking of what Jiju had said, Xiao Xian could clearly feel the thoughts and emotions of this beetle. The more it grew, the closer this connection became. Sapphire's carapace was now like a metal helmet. It was very hard. However, there were crisscrossing marks on this hard shell. Some are marks caused by sharp weapons, while others were marks caused by blunt weapons. This bug had also encountered many things. Finally, they brought the team here. It was impossible for them to leave immediately. They needed a rest here. After walking for so long, everyone had not had a good rest. They were exhausted. Ao asked the soldiers to give the fish that they had caught to these new brothers. Then, they went into the sea again to look for opportunities. These days, they had mastered the skills of fishing in the sea. It was not as difficult as before. Probably because they were close to the sea, the air was not as dry as deep in the desert. The rainstones condensed water faster. After receiving water, the people gradually recovered. The soldiers who were still in good spirits started to chat with their new brothers. Because they were not familiar with the languages used on both sides of the sea were different. Although many people had some contact with the tribal language, they were still not used to it. At first, they stumbled a little. However, they were able to express the general idea with words and gestures. Both sides had a lively conversation, especially when Tual and the others saw the weapons in the hands of their new brothers. Their eyes were wide open. Metal weapons were not common here. They had seen more of them in the desert. Even the other tribes had stolen them from the slave masters. After the core seed was brought back, the stone was placed there. However, they did not know how to smelt it, so it had been put aside. Tual and the others felt that their worldview had been turned upside down. Duo Kong, who had heard about the situation here, was not surprised. He even generously gave a small copper knife to Gigu. The two hunting team leaders had their arms around each other's shoulders as they chatted. Tuo, Mao, Emo, and the others were also chatting with Tao Zheng and Wu Zhan. The former was envious of the latter for being able to afford metal weapons. The latter was envious of the former for having such powerful, fearsome beasts. Although the fearsome beasts were listless now, this was only temporary. As soon as they left the desert, they would immediately recover their health. Without fire, the tribesmen used rocks. During the day, the rocks in the desert were very hot. When food was placed on the rocks, you could hear a sizzling sound. Although they could not be fully cooked, it was better than eating them raw. Who knew if the fish in the sea would get sick if they ate them raw? Yang Guang and his sister also brought their tamed fearsome beasts this time. Every time they came, they would personally go into the sea to find food for the two fearsome beasts. When Xiao Xian looked over, he saw Qiao Mai's Guang Guang throwing a large conch at the forest raccos. The forest raccos used its beak as a chisel and easily broke the conch. After looking around, Xiao Xian retracted his gaze and asked Ao about the situation here. After 2 years, there should have been a lot of changes. The forces in the desert have indeed changed a lot. Now there are no longer the 3 major cities, only Rock Hill City. The other smaller cities are all vassals. However, Rock Hill City is currently cleaning up the remaining forces. They haven't made any moves yet. When we came here, we didn't meet anyone from Rock Hill City. Ao said, after all, the desert was huge. Even if Rock Hill City was the overlord of the desert, they wouldn't be scattered to every corner of the desert. Most places were just yellow sand. Unless they were purposely cleaning up a certain force, they wouldn't send troops there. As for why the tribesmen didn't meet anyone from Rock Hill City, it could be because of luck. It could also be because of the beetle. After all, it was the beetle that led the way. Xiao Xian was already prepared for the outcome in the desert. Especially after learning about some of the secrets of the past, he knew that the people surnamed Sure were planning something big. He just didn't know how they were going to take revenge. What about the tribe? Xiao Xian asked again. The tribe is fine. Everything is going well. The harvest from the fields is also good. The wanderers are also well-behaved. As for the other tribes, I didn't hear anything big. However, when there was a scuffle in the desert, I heard that a few tribes sent people to the desert a few times. They must have taken a lot of things. What about the others? The others? Like the weather. How was the past winter? Xiao Xian asked. The weather? Speaking of which, it's strange. In the past, there was always snow in the mountains. This year, there was no snow, only rain. We asked later, and it didn't snow anywhere else. It was rare to have a warm winter. We even went hunting in the mountains a few times. Ha! Ao laughed. However, as he laughed, he noticed that Xiao Xian and Zheng Luo's expressions were strange. Chapter 494. What's wrong? Ao asked, puzzled. Xiao Xian told him about the situation on the other side of the sea. That winter was indeed strange. The conditions on both sides of the sea were polar opposites. One side was almost frozen to ice, while the other side was so hot that they didn't even want to wear the thinnest animal skin clothes. After listening to Xiao Xian, Ao fell into deep thought. The situation on the other side of the sea that Xiao Xian described was much worse than their situation on the other side of the river. No one felt at ease when things were out of the ordinary. Although they had thought of many possibilities and were worried, they were not as shocked as they were now. No matter what, it's fine if the weather doesn't change. If it gets hotter this winter, it's better for us to prepare in advance. Hot weather had its inconveniences. Plants had lost their original growth patterns, and the habits of the beasts in the forest had been disrupted. If they wanted to have a good harvest, they had to prepare more. However, there was still half a year's time. It was better to solve the problem at hand first. The team rested for 3 days. They could not stay here forever. Food and water had always been a big problem. If they continued, not only would the situation not improve, it would worsen. A few fearsome beasts helped carry some of the sick and injured. Ao also brought some people to carry them. No matter how weak they were much better than these people who had come all the way here. Even if the current situation was not good, everyone was happy. When people were happy, they would have motivation. Xiao Xian asked Sapphire to control the beetles to follow behind and lie in ambush. They did not surround the area. This would scare away the desert beasts that came out at night. They did not want to encounter them before because they were in trouble. Now that they were short of food, they would kill every beast they encountered. Therefore, when they saw a huge scorpion come out, everyone's eyes turned green as if they could shine. The huge scorpion that had rushed out of the sand with a murderous aura felt an even stronger murderous aura. Even its tail froze, and it turned to run. Swish, swish, swish. Dozens of people jumped out of the team, not giving the scorpion a chance to escape. Gigu and the others wanted to show off in front of their brother tribe. They shouted, "We'll do it. Back off, let's do it. You guys should rest first. We should be the ones to entertain you." On the other side, Duo Kong and the rest. "No need, really, we can handle it ourselves." He hadn't hunted for a long time, and his hands were itching. One scorpion was not enough to split the spoils. The other ferocious beasts in the team did not even get a chance to show off their skills. They were like bystanders. When they entered the desert, their limelight was stolen by the beetle, and when they left, they did not even have a chance to steal the limelight. Most of the time, the group would wait for the sun to dim down before they started their journey. Then, they would find a place to rest before the sun came out. It was impossible for such a large troop to remain unnoticed. Actually, when the Yinjiao people entered the desert, Rock Hill City scouts had already wanted to keep an eye on them. However, when they encountered the insect wave, they did not follow them closely. They only sent someone to report to their superiors and guard a few key points to prevent the tribesmen from stealing their things. If the young master had not taken the important things in advance, the tribesmen would have stolen even more. During the chaotic times in the desert, many tribesmen took advantage of the chaos to steal metal weapons. This was the impression that the people in the desert had of the tribesmen. Therefore, when they saw a troop of close to 1,000 people enter the desert, they were all on guard. Although there had been tribesmen in the past, there had never been such a large troop. There were even ferocious beasts among them. Now that they had detected the troops' movements and did not see the insect wave, they could monitor them. Unfortunately, Yinjiao also had a white bird that was difficult to deal with. Therefore, it was difficult to monitor them from the air. They could only keep a distance from Yinjiao's troop and follow them. However, why did Yinjiao's troop suddenly increase by so much? This made them raise their vigilance from the beginning to the highest level. When did such a huge team suddenly appear in the desert? Could it be that they had gathered a few scattered factions? No, they had to report the latest information quickly. The Yinjiao people also knew that there were people watching them nearby, but it was difficult to catch them. They did not have the energy to deal with those people now. They just wanted to leave the desert as soon as possible. As long as those people did not provoke them, they did not want to waste energy fighting. "Hey, look over there." A Yinjiao warrior covered his head under the hot sun and looked at a sand dune not far away. On the long sand dune, there were some creatures walking on the sand ridge. When they saw those creatures, most of the people in the troop wanted to rush up with their knives and slaughter those creatures. However, they were stopped by Xiao Xian. If they were stopped by others, they would have other thoughts. After all, it was rare to come across such good food. If they did not slaughter it, how could they live up to their luck? The chief did not even say anything. What were you shouting for? However, the one who stopped them was Xiao Xian. Whether it was on this side of the sea or the other side of the sea, Xiao Xian's position was very special. Although it was said that his position in the tribe was second only to the shaman and the chief, his influence was definitely greater than the other two. Especially after the crossing of the sea incident, no one in the Yinjiao team could directly refute Xiao Xian's words. Whoever did would be beaten up by others. Therefore, when Xiao Xian stopped them, the people who rushed overexcitedly with their knives turned around and ran back obediently. There must be a reason why Xiao Xian stopped them. Xiao Xian raised his hand to shield his head from a scorching sun. He looked at the long line of camels on the sand ridge with a big smile on his face. He really did not know how this group of camels had survived in the desert until now and safely gathered in such a large group. Mud, it's still alive? Yes, in the group of camels walking on the sand ridge, the leading camel with a white face, 2 white short ears, and long dark brown hair at the front of its curved neck and hump was the camel that Yang Sui gave to Xiao Xian. The high temperature made the scene a little distorted. Xiao Xian shielded his head from the sun and looked at Mud, who was walking in front of the camels with its head slightly raised. It was facing the wind and sand, leading the camels towards them. Mud called twice, the long hair on its head fluttering in the wind, as if it was greeting Xiao Xian. Hearing Xiao Xian call Mud, Tuo, and Lei also remembered the origin of the camel and explained to the others. When Xiao Xian left Autumnfall, he could not bring Mud with him, so he let it go. It only had a leather bag with water hanging around its neck. Now, the bag was empty and the bag was open. The bag was tattered and there were obvious bite marks. If it were not for the bag, Xiao Xian would not have recognized it in the first place. Seeing Mud walk to the side of the giant beetle, Xiao Xian could feel that Sapphire seemed to be familiar with this camel. He guessed that Sapphire must have helped Mud and the camels to be able to wander safely in the desert during the war. After all, many people would not think of anything else when they encountered an insect tide. The best thing to do was to run. Who would have a mind to hunt camels? Let's go together. Xiao Xian patted Mud's neck. Although it looked thin, it was very energetic. It was already a great fortune to be alive. Xiao Xian did not know whether this song was an acceptance or rejection. He let a few soldiers sit on the camel's back, and they were not rejected. Most of these camels should have been raised by people. Later, they left the slave master city during the war and came out. Otherwise, wild camels would not have been so easy to get in touch with. Bring the sick and injured over and let these camels carry them. Xiao Xian fed some water to the camels and felt that they were much closer to them. With the camels helping to carry the injured, everyone in the team could relax. Sapphire often circled around Xiao Xian. Even the face of Caesar's baring teeth, it persisted. Xiao Xian knew what it wanted. After the third unlock, the beetle still had 2 locks on its body. No slave did not want to be unlocked. In the past 2 years, there were many wars in the desert and Sapphire was injured several times. If it were not for the insect tide, it would have been difficult to avoid those disasters. Once the situation in the desert stabilized, would there be people who would specifically target it? After all, the insect tide was a big problem for the slave masters in the desert, especially the Shi family who was now in power. Shi Shu knew that Sapphire was on Xiao Xian's side. He could not let such a threat remain in the desert. Whether it was Sapphire or the insect army, they had long gotten used to the desert's climate and environment. They were used to the desert's sandy ground, so they would not feel comfortable in a new environment. The best way to give Sapphire more protection was to make it stronger. Therefore, when they were getting closer to the edge of the desert, Xiao Xian took Sapphire to a sand dune during their break and tried to unlock the 4th lock. After Xiao Xian left the desert, he did not know when he would return. If he could unlock it successfully, it would increase the beetle's chances of survival. Unlocking the 4th lock consumed a lot of energy. A large amount of totemic power and power of inheritance were lost. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had recovered most of his depleted energy from crossing the sea. In addition, when he trained the bone ornaments, he had more precise control of the 2 powers. Although it was not easy to unlock the 4th lock on Sapphire's body, it was a success in the end. After unlocking the 4th lock, Sapphire sank into the sand. Xiao Xian could feel that this time, it might be asleep for a long time. The 4th lock was obviously more difficult than the 3rd. It was a hurdle. Xiao Xian could only unlock it. As for the future, it would depend on Sapphire. After Sapphire sank into the sand, the other beetles did not appear again. For a long time, the insect tide did not appear in the desert. Of course, that was a story for later. On the 4th day after unlocking Sapphire, the team finally walked out of the desert. The team decided to rest around the Rain Tribe and get some food to eat. When Yang Sui received a report from the Rain Tribesmen that a large team was approaching the Rain Tribe, he was very worried. He was worried that the people in the desert would attack the Rain Tribe. But after looking around, he realized that it was not a slave master. There were a few familiar faces in front of the team. Yang Sui relaxed a little and his expression softened. There was a smile in his eyes. When he saw the group of camels next to the team, Yang Sui recognized Mud at the front. The smile in his eyes widened. But soon, The smile in his eyes turned into surprise and then shock. Damn, there were only 1,000 people when they left. How come there were so many now? What happened to this world? Chapter 495. Yang Sui was very happy to see Xiao Xin again. Without Xiao Xin, there would be no shaman of the Rain tribe. Yang Sui would have been burned to death long ago. Although he didn't know what happened to Xiao Xin in the past 2 years, it was probably the luckiest thing for him to walk out of the desert alive. Yang Sui's childhood sweetheart, Misty, was even happier than Yang Sui. She didn't have any special feelings for the Yinjiao people. She was just happy to see Mud. When she sent Mud away, she was prepared to never see him again. She didn't expect to see him again 2 years later, and a group of them came back. These camels followed them out of the desert and probably had to stay in the Rain tribe in the future. They didn't seem to want to leave and followed Misty obediently. Now that the sapphires sunk into the sand, they had no protection. Compared to the chaotic and dangerous desert, this place was much safer. Yang Sui didn't understand why the Yinjiao people suddenly quadrupled, but he still asked people to prepare water and food. Thank you. Xiao Xian returned all the rain stones that Yang Sui borrowed. As for the one that Yang Sui gave him, Yang Sui didn't ask for it back. Haha, you're welcome. It's good that you came out alive. I heard that the desert was very chaotic these 2 years. Yang Sui handed the rain stone to the person next to him. Seeing that all the rain stones were returned, the people of the Rain tribe finally felt relieved. Their attitude towards the Yinjiao people also eased a lot. After all, rain stones were very important to living in such a dry place. There were too many people in the Yinjiao team, so the arranged houses couldn't accommodate all of them. They could only let the sick and weak people live in the houses. The rest of the warriors stayed outside and sat on the ground. There are no sandstorms these days. You can rest here without worries, Yang Sui said. Xiao Xian still believed in Yang Sui's ability to predict the weather. If he said there would be no sandstorms these days, then there definitely wouldn't be. Otherwise, he wouldn't be a shaman anymore. When people were hungry, they could eat dry and hard biscuits. The warriors chewed the dry and hard biscuits and drank water sparingly. They felt alive again. Are those people from Yinjiao? Yang Sui asked Xiao Xian as he looked at the group of people sitting on the ground. At first, he thought that the Yinjiao people had brought a group of slaves from the desert, but now it seemed that was not the case. They got along too well, as if they were one. Moreover, the newcomers had the aura of the fire seed, which belonged to the Yinjiao tribe. As a shaman, Yang Sui was very sensitive to this. Yes, they're all from Yinjiao. Xiao Xian sighed. By the way, it's so chaotic in the desert. You're close to the desert. Are you okay? How could he be completely fine? Yang Sui was angry at the mention of this. Because of the war in the desert, people often escaped from the desert and brought a lot of trouble to the Rain tribe. Some people even wanted to rob them. Several people of the Rain tribe who went out to look for rain stones mysteriously disappeared. A few days later, when they sent people out to look for rain stones, they found a few skeletons in the place where they often looked for rain stones. There was not much flesh, and the marks on the skeletons were cut by sharp weapons instead of being bitten by beasts. Now, as long as slaves come out, our tribe treats them as enemies. It's okay if they stay far away, but if they want to come close, the warriors of the Rain tribe will kill them directly. Speaking of this, Yang Sui sighed. I know it's dangerous to be too close to those slave owners. In fact, I think it would be better if our tribe could move a little farther away to a more fertile place. Some things couldn't be solved by praying for rain. Those people in the desert were too dangerous. Who knew what would happen in the future? As the shaman of the Rain tribe, Yang Sui also had a heavy burden on his shoulders. He really wanted to move the tribe to a better place. However, it was very risky to move the tribe. Otherwise, they would have moved long ago instead of waiting until now. No one wanted to take the risk. What if the fire seed was destroyed during the migration? The fighting power of the Rain tribe was not as strong as that of the Yinjiao. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian became serious and winked at Yang Sui. Talk. Yang Sui knew that Xiao Xian had something to say, so he nodded and took Xiao Xian to the shaman's exclusive room. No one was allowed to enter, Even the chief was not allowed to enter without permission. Looking at the layout of the room and thinking of the situation before Yang Sui became a shaman, he felt that things were different now. Shaman, you're living a good life. Xiao Xian sat down on a stone bench. Not bad. Yang Sui grinned. By the way, what do you want to talk to me about? Is it important? It's really important, Xiao Xian said. I remember when I came here 2 years ago, you said that there was a problem with the fire seed of your tribe. Xiao Xian knew the secret of the fire seed because of Yang Sui. Yes, the shaman of the rain tribe could pray for rain, but the key factor to the success of praying for rain was not the shaman, but the fire seed. Because the fire seed was in trouble, no matter how hard it prayed, it could not succeed. Yang Sui once told Xiao Xian that the fire seed seemed to be asleep. When a shaman prayed for rain, he could not wake it up no matter how hard he tried. It only woke up once a year during the big sacrifice. At other times, it would not wake up. Moreover, this situation had become more and more serious for thousands of years. This was why the people of the Rain tribe were so crazy when Yang Sui succeeded in praying for rain 2 years ago. I found a reason, Xiao Xian said, and I know there's a solution. Yang Sui was shocked and looked at Xiao Xian in surprise. What's the solution? If there was a solution, he had to do it, even if it was risky. Xiao Xian told Yang Sui some information he got from the other side of the sea. He did not talk about the specific situation on the other side of the sea. He only said that the fire seed could be integrated into everyone's body, and it did not have to be in the fire pit. However, after the fire seed disappeared, the tribe would also face the risk of disbanding. Many tribes disappeared on the other side of the sea. The wanderers formed various new forces or lived in the cities under the jurisdiction of the slave owners. The cohesion of the tribe would be greatly weakened, which was the biggest risk. After listening to Xiao Xian, Yang Sui was silent for a while. He had to admit that Xiao Xian's words made him very embarrassed. He knew the reason for the weakening of the fire seed and the solution to prevent it from continuing to weaken, but the risk was also unacceptable. The existence of the tribe was to gather the strength of the tribe and unite around the fire seed. But if this cohesion was gone, would the Rain tribe still exist? What will you choose? Yang Sui looked straight into Xiao Xian's eyes. He wanted to confirm whether Xiao Xian's answer was true. Our choice. In fact, it's very clear. With your ability, you should be able to tell the difference between the people outside and the Yinjiao tribesmen, right? Yang Sui's pupils shrank, and he unconsciously clenched his fists. That is, they're the fire seed. Xiao Xian got up and was about to leave. He had said what he wanted to say. As for the choice, it was up to Yang Sui. As long as the people are here, the fire seed is here. As long as the people are here, the tribe is here. Think about it carefully. If you decide, you can go to the Yinjiao tribe to find me. You have been to the ferocious beast mountain forest. Xiao Xian knew that Yang Sui couldn't make up his mind in such a short time. This was a big decision that would determine the future of the whole tribe. Even if Yang Sui was the shaman of the Rain tribe, he couldn't make this decision alone. After Xiao Xian left, Yang Sui shut himself in the room and thought for a long time. He told the guards outside to keep away all disturbances. Once he was lost in thought, he would forget everything outside. When Yang Sui came out of the room, the Yinjiao tribesmen had already left. After standing by the fire pit for a while, Yang Sui invited several senior elders and the current chief to have a talk in the house. The other members of the Rain tribe didn't know what these senior elders talked about. They only knew that when they came out, they were all in a trance and kept their mouths shut. No matter how others asked, they didn't say a word. On the other side, the Yinjiao tribesmen who had left the Rain tribe were also heading back to the ferocious beast mountain forest. For the newcomers, many things here were very new. This was because the tribes here maintained even more ancient customs. The weapons they used were all stone tools, horns, bones, and so on. The metal knives in their hands had long been tied up in animal skin bags or clothes, and all the bronze weapons were covered. Therefore, when the Rain tribe rested, the people of the Rain tribe didn't see their bronze weapons. When they walked along the road, They also made a lot of wrought tan and woven baskets and tied them up again to cover their weapons. After all, there were too few bronze weapons here. It would be too eye-catching to carry them. They just came back and hadn't adjusted their condition, so they didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble. About the fire seed, did you tell the Rain Tribe shaman? Ao asked Xiao Xian. Yes, he can decide what to do, Xiao Xian said. Ao nodded. He felt that Yang Sui was a trustworthy person. He had helped their tribe too, although it was for Xiao Xian's sake. After interacting with him, Ao felt that Yang Sui was more trustworthy than the other big tribes. Speaking of the fire seed, Ao himself found it hard to believe. When Zheng Luo and the others came ashore, Ao was still looking forward to finding the fire seed. At first, he thought the fire seed was the source of the fire seed. Later, he found out it was the power of the ancestral bone ornaments. But what about the fire seed? After Xiao Xian's explanation, Ao finally understood the secret. As a traditional chief of a tribe, Ao couldn't accept living without the fire seed. But looking at these new brothers, their strength was probably a little higher than the people in the tribe. This was the power of the fire seed. Moreover, the reason why the ancestors left back then was because of this. Now that they had returned, it proved that those who left back then were right. They had completed their mission and found a solution to prevent the fire seed from continuing to weaken. Listening to the matters on the other side of the sea, it was obvious that the situation on the other side was much better than on this side. A new era was coming. At this turning point, it was up to everyone to make a choice. While Ao was struggling, Xiao Xian was thinking. This time, once the two teams merged, there would be 2 chiefs, 2 shamans, and 3 team leaders. What should they do? Chapter 496. The Flaming Horn Tribe's team was too big and too eye-catching. Along the way, almost everyone who saw this team looked at them with a strange expression. Ao had already chosen a different route from the one they took. But with such a large number, it was enough to beat most tribes. This was the same size as when they first crossed the river to return to their homeland. They could not be ignored. In other people's eyes, the Yinjiao tribe was migrating again. This could not be hidden even if they wanted to. Other tribes would know when they talked about it. Did you know? The Yinjiao tribe is migrating again. One of the traders said, Migrating? I've seen it. It's been a while. I remember there weren't many people. I thought they were going to war with someone. Another trader was very confused. Not many? There were a lot of people. Old people, children, women, everyone. I saw it with my own eyes. Their team passed right in front of our tribe. Old people and children? I don't remember that. Yes. Why not? I counted. There were at least 5,000 people. That's a lot more than our tribe. What? 5,000? You must have counted wrong. I'm good at counting. There's no way I'm wrong. I don't believe it. Do you dare swear on your tribe's totem? Fine, I'll swear. Similar conversations appeared in many places. However, Yinjiao's team continued on their planned route. They did not know that they had started a heated discussion. Even if they did, they would not care. They were busy. Where would they find the time to talk nonsense with unimportant people? As they got closer to fearsome beast forest, Zheng Luo and the rest could feel a familiar aura, as if it was one with them. Although they were in an unfamiliar environment, that direction gave them a warm and safe sense of familiarity. The totem power in their bodies surged as if they were eager to get there. The bright totem patterns on their bodies flashed, just like their mood at the moment. Although they had seen Zheng Luo's totemic patterns a few times in the desert, Ao and the rest couldn't help but sigh. Was this the result of merging with the fire seed? For those who had not merged with the fire seed, their totem tattoos were dark in color when they activated their totem power. Xiao Xian was an exception. But now, when these newcomers had bright totem tattoos flashing on their bodies, Ao and the others were envious. They were not envious of the bright totem tattoos, but the aura that these newcomers exuded was indeed stronger than theirs. Although the difference was not huge, it was enough to change many people's minds. Previously, when Ao heard that he had to fuse with the fire seed, he was unwilling. But gradually he began to waver. After the fusion, the potential of the warriors would be greater, and the flame seed would not continue to weaken. Who wouldn't want to have greater power? At the same time, outside the fearsome beast forest, a large number of people had gathered in the Wancher tribe. When Ao left with his people and a few fearsome beasts, the Wancher tribe received the news. They also considered whether to take this opportunity to attack the Yinjiao tribe. Those who left were half of the Yinjiao's main force. As for the remaining half in the forest, the Wancher tribe felt that they could take care of them. After the war in the desert, some people escaped. Among them were the slave masters who had worked with the Wancher tribe in the past. The reason why the Wancher tribe could develop to such a scale in a few hundred years was because of the slave masters in the desert. Although the situation in the desert had not completely stabilized, the smart people knew that soon, only Rock Hill City would exist in the desert. There would not be any other powers that could threaten Rock Hill City. They could not return to the desert. Hence, those who escaped the desert turned their attention to the Wancher tribe. They were very grateful that their ancestors had supported the Wancher tribe. This gave them a way out, since they could no longer stay in the desert, and the other tribes did not trust the slave masters. Instead, they wanted to steal from the slave masters. The slave masters who escaped had only one choice. Now, the Wancher tribe had the support of some of the slave masters who escaped. In addition to the Wancher warriors, there were many slaves who could be used as cannon fodder on the front lines. However, the decision to attack the Flaming Horn tribe was met with opposition from some people, especially the slave masters. It wasn't easy for them to escape, so they didn't want to experience any more chaos. Attacking the Flaming Horn tribe would definitely cause them a lot of losses. Moreover, Yinjiao was a tribe living in the forest. They were poor and had poor land. Even if they succeeded, what could they do? Could they even snatch the territory inside? They did not want to live in a forest full of fearsome beasts. Even if they wanted to fight, they had to wait until they had more slaves. Otherwise, if the slaves became cannon fodder, who would protect the slave masters? In the past, the Wancher chief was the only one who made decisions in the tribe. No one could object to his decisions. But now, with the addition of these slave owners, the influence of the Wancher chief was diluted. The chief was no longer the absolute authority. Any decision had to be approved by the slave owners. Otherwise, they would not support or provide manpower or other things. The Wancher chief had thought about rebelling, but the slave masters were too cunning. He did not dare to take the risk. He had been suppressing his anger. Now, the Wancher chief wanted to attack Yinjiao. These people jumped out to oppose him. They said that something must have happened since the Yinjiao chief took so many people out. Perhaps he was trying to lure them into a trap. Then they would surround them from the front and back. This was a trap for the Wancher tribe. Trap my ass. The Wancher chief wanted to strangle them, but he had to consider the slave master's opinions. He could only hold his anger. But as the days went by, they noticed that the fire seed in the fire pit was getting weaker, as if it was being suppressed by a stronger force. The new Wancher shaman persuaded the slave masters. Only Yinjiao could directly suppress the fire seed of the Wancher tribe. Finally, they came to a consensus. The slave masters provided some slaves. The Wancher chief gathered the warriors of the tribe and brought out the Wancher beasts. After a few days of preparation, they were finally ready to go. Looking at the green forest in the distance, the Wancher chief's eyes flashed with madness. He still remembered that the Yinjiao people had stood at the edge of the forest and said, "Go in. Those who enter the forest will die. I'll go in. So what? Not only will I go in, but I'll also step into Yinjiao's territory and take all your valuables and women." The sun was setting. This time, the Wancher people planned to attack at night. During the day, the Yinjiao people were familiar with the forest and had the advantage. But at night, it was different. They had heard that the Yinjiao people rarely went out at night. On the other hand, the Wancher beasts they brought out all had good night vision. Besides, the Wancher tribe had done a lot of night robberies. They were familiar with the job. They just needed to be careful in the forest. Yinjiao didn't have those beasts. Even if there were some left in the forest, they wouldn't be able to stop all 40 Wancher beasts at once. Very good plan. Listen to my orders. The Wancher chief raised his knife and was about to give the order when he heard a long, sharp cry of a bird in the sky. A white bird flew across the sky like a flash of white lightning. That's the one from Yinjiao. Didn't it leave with them? Could it be? Someone on the team said. After the bird's cry, there was a wolf's howl and other beasts' roars. It didn't come from the forest. That's Yinjiao's team is back. The Wancher chief scolded. What are you shouting for? Beat them even if they're back. It wasn't easy to get the slave masters here. How could they give up so easily? It was just a few thousand people coming back. They would beat them all the same. However, they soon realized that there were more than what they had expected. 2,000 people? 3,000? It seemed more than that. Even far away, the Wancher people could feel the fierce momentum rushing over. It was too fierce, too strong. They didn't want to face it at all. No, we won't go. One of the senior slaves decided immediately. Although they came with the Wancher chief, their master had ordered them to go back immediately if they felt something was wrong. They didn't want to die with the Wancher people. It wasn't easy to get out of the desert and survive. They didn't want to act rashly before they had absolute confidence. The war in the desert had scared them out of their wits. After that senior slave said that, the other senior slaves all expressed their opinions. Although the current situation was indeed unexpected, Wancher's leader almost suffered an internal injury from holding back his anger. The Wancher chief opened his mouth a few times. He wanted to give the order to attack, but after thinking for a while, he swallowed it back. He forcefully withdrew his chi. Because he did it too quickly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression became ferocious. His eyes were full of struggle, and the veins on his arm, which was holding the stone saber, bulged. Fight? Yinjiao's main force was back. Not only were they back, but they also brought back reinforcements. If they attacked, they wouldn't gain anything. Plus, their people had betrayed them. How could they fight? Not fight. Where would their dignity go? Where would their prestige go? But in the face of reality, the Wancher chief had to stop his plan after weighing the pros and cons. Go back. The Wancher chief tasted the blood in his mouth. He suppressed his anger and said. However, because the Wancher leader's voice was not loud and the other Wancher people's attention was on the new team, they did not hear the leader's words clearly. Even if they didn't react immediately. What? Chief, what did you just say? A person standing next to the Wancher chief asked. I said, go back. The Wancher chief almost roared. He was so angry that he didn't know how to vent it. He spat out another mouthful of blood after shouting. Seeing this, the others didn't dare to ask any more questions. Although they didn't want to miss the best opportunity, they didn't want to continue. They still cherished their lives. Thus, when the Wancher people were sharpening their swords and planning to attack Yinjiao, while Yinjiao was weak, the plan fell apart. In the Yinjiao tribe, in fearsome beast forest, Ta had already received information about the Wancher tribe's movements. Although the tribe had the fire seed as a line of defense, they couldn't completely rely on it. The fire seed's range was limited. They had to fight on their own. In fact, when the shamanist sent out so many people, he had different opinions. But since the shamanist made the decision, he didn't object. He ordered his men to prepare for the battle. Ta planned to ask the shamanists if they should transfer some of the tribe's people. After all, half of their main forces were gone. It would be difficult for them to fight. No one could predict what would happen. But after he asked, the shamanist still stood by the fire pit in silence. After a while, she said, no need, but Ta wanted to say something, but the shamanist said, everyone, don't prepare. This battle will happen sooner or later, but it won't happen today. Ta looked at the shamanist in confusion. He didn't understand what she meant. The shamanist didn't explain further. She just stared at the flames in the fire pit. The flames in the fire pit surged. Since the fire had suddenly started, it had not stopped. Moreover, the flames were getting higher and higher, and the fire was getting stronger and stronger. The shamanist stood by the fire pit and looked at the flames. Her weathered eyes were filled with tears, shining in the light of the fire. Although she didn't go out with Ao and the others, she knew what might happen. It's been 1,000 years. The shamanist sighed. It had been 1,000 years. The Yinjiao tribe, which used to be known by everyone in its heyday, had fallen to a forgotten corner. Natural disasters, division, the lack of a fire seed, people's hearts wavered, and so on. So much so that they could only curl up in a small corner far away from the mainland, forcibly isolated. Although they didn't know how their ancestors felt when they carved those murals in the cave, from the words left behind by their ancestor, Zan, and from the animal skin scrolls passed down, they knew that generation after generation of flaming horns held on to hope. They hoped that one day, the glory of the past would return. One day, they would return to their homeland. The glory would still be there. The fire of the flaming horns would never be extinguished. The glory of Yinjiao will return. Tears finally rolled down for the shamanist's eyes, leaving 2 lines of water stains on her wrinkled old face. Ha! Ha ha! With tears in her eyes, the shamanist stared at the flames in the fire pit and laughed hoarsely. She was hysterical and excited to the extreme. Ta, who was standing next to her, was dumbfounded. The usually calm and steady shamanist had gone crazy. The flames in the fire pit roared in the wind, and the 2-horned totem slowly appeared. The totem patterns on Ta's body also appeared spontaneously. Ta sensed something and looked in a direction in the forest. Just now, he had heard the chirping of birds and the roaring of beasts. They were sounds that he was familiar with. However, at this moment, he was thinking about something that had nothing to do with the roaring of beasts. He fixed his gaze in that direction, as if he was waiting for something. Not only Ta, but all the Yinjiao people had a strange feeling. No matter what they were doing, they all stopped what they were doing and looked in the same direction. The sky gradually darkened, and the light of the sun gradually dimmed. The light of the fire gradually became more prominent, and even the silver light of the 2 moons couldn't dim it. In the dense forest that covered the sky and the sun, in the darkness, as the sound of footsteps approached, some dense spots of light that resembled the color of fire seeds appeared. Chapter 497. Ta couldn't help but move towards that direction. People from other parts of the tribe also came over and stood behind Ta, looking in the direction of the forest. In the dark forest, there were many scattered lights moving. At first, they thought someone was lighting a torch, but soon they realized that it wasn't the fire from the torch, but the light from people. People had fire on them? There were many people in the forest, and they could tell from the sound of the footsteps. If Ta and the others weren't familiar with the footsteps of the giant beasts, and the breath of Ao and the others, and the strong sense of familiarity and strangeness, they would have taken up their weapons. Ta was stunned when he saw the face of the person in front. Xian? At this time, Xiao Xian and the others had already entered the tribe. The soldiers who were patrolling the area also came over. At first, they were worried that the Wan Sure people would attack, but soon they realized that wasn't the case. They couldn't bring themselves to hate them at all, and when they knew who they were, they followed obediently. The shamanist's hand holding her walking stick was trembling. She felt as if her feet weighed 1,000 pounds, and every step was heavy. Her anticipation reached its peak, and she felt a little scared, like she was in a trance. On this seemingly ordinary day, the 2 tribes that had been separated for 1,000 years met again in the fearsome beast forest. After 2 years, Xiao Xian saw the people here again. I'm back. Xiao Xian walked over and gave the shamanist a hug. Good, good. The shamanist's eyes glistened with tears. She looked at Xiao Xian carefully. After 2 years, Xiao Xian still looked the same, but he gave off a feeling that he had changed a lot, especially the obvious totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's body. She glanced at Xiao Xian, then looked at the people behind Xiao Xian. Ao and the other shamans were directly ignored. Their figures were too familiar. Moreover, when Ao and the others stood together with the newcomers, they were really inconspicuous. Their totem patterns were all glowing. As the shamaness, she could clearly feel the strong fire seed energy on these people, and it resonated with the fire pit in the tribe. However, the fire seed was nowhere to be seen. Realizing something, a thought flashed through the shaman's mind. However, This was not the time for him to think about it. The people in front of him were the people, all Yinjiao people, the people their ancestors have been looking forward to for thousands of years. Now, they had finally arrived. Who was that old lady riding on Caesar's back and holding a walking stick? Ao strode over and briefly introduced these people to the shaman. Then he turned to Ta and said, "Go and tell everyone to prepare food and treat the new brothers well. All right, by the way, tell everyone to clear out some rooms tonight and prepare more appliances." "Oh, okay." Tower nodded repeatedly. Although he wasn't clear about the specific situation, his intuition told him something. He looked at the group of newcomers again, then turned around and left to make arrangements. "There are many injured people in the team. We need to prepare more medicine," Xiao Xian said to the shaman. "Yes, I understand." It was a difficult journey from the other side of the sea to here. They had crossed the desert and traveled a long distance to fearsome beast forest. Zheng Luo's team was indeed very tired, but because of their excitement, they were very clear-headed. Especially when they saw the soaring flames in the fire pit, everyone knelt down devoutly. It was a fire seed, a real fire seed. It wasn't a part of their bodies, but a fire seed that existed in the fire pit. It was a primitive fire seed that could be seen with the naked eye. Seeing the pyro seed was like seeing another home. All the anxiety and worries from before were swept away. Ao introduced the new team to the people of the tribe. The injured could finally get better treatment and recuperation, and the hungry warriors could finally let down their guard and eat to their heart's content. The people of the Old Han tribe were very enthusiastic. Although it was their first time meeting each other, and they were a little restrained and shy at first, they soon started chatting and laughing after gnawing on a few beast legs. On the way, Zheng Luo's team had a lot of communication with Ao and the others, so they were much more proficient in using the old language. They didn't need to make gestures when they stuttered a few words. Now they could brag smoothly. The women gathered together to talk about their own topics. The men gathered around the fire to brag. The children and the elderly were placed on the other side to rest. After all, there were too many people. Even if the tribe made room temporarily, it was impossible for everyone to live in a house. It was too late to build a house, and no one had the energy to do so. But Zheng Luo's team didn't care. It was a warm place, not as cold as winter, and not as hot as the desert. They could sleep on the grass. Besides, they were all on the same side. With the protection of the fire seed, they could sleep soundly on the ground. After eating and drinking, they were easy to be satisfied. As for the others, they would deal with them after they slept. "Don't be afraid. If you don't have a place to sleep, we'll sleep with you on the grass." Mai patted a man of the same age as him and said, "Near the border, where the tribesmen and wanderers lived, Yanji and Jiaowu each carried a few roasted beast legs. There were several large animal skin bags hanging from their waists, which contained some fruits and grains harvested last year." After knowing the identity of the newcomers, Yanji and Jiao Wu were very happy. The arrival of these people would definitely make the Yinjiao tribe stronger. After all, they were all Yinjiao tribesmen. They were much closer than the wanderers from other tribes or the partners of other tribes. They were willing to trust the people brought by Xiao Xian. When the chief asked everyone to take out food, the two brothers carried out most of the stock. If there was no food, they could hunt again. But they couldn't let the newcomers starve. They heard that it was very difficult for them to come here. Many of them were so hungry that they were almost skinny. The two brothers were laughing and talking when they were suddenly stopped by someone. "Hey, Yinji Jiao Wu, wait." They looked over and saw that it was He Air, a wanderer they knew when they were in the Longboat tribe. Since they came to the old haunt, Yinji and Jiao Wu had awakened their totemic power. Their lives were much better, and the wanderers who had helped them also benefited a lot. He Air and the others were forced to come here. It was rare for them to see a little hope, so they followed the two brothers here. They didn't expect that although they lived in the ferocious beast mountain forest, they could live a good life under the protection of the Yinjiao warriors. In addition, the Yinjiao tribe often hired wanderers to help them and paid them. For people without totemic power like Pierre and the others, they were very satisfied. Pierre also married a wander girl. At the beginning of this year, they had their own child. But yesterday, someone in the Wanderer's residence said that the Wanshur tribe was going to fight with the Yinjiao tribe. But half of the Yinjiao tribe's fighting force was out of the forest. The fighting force here was not enough. Maybe the Yinjiao tribe would be in danger. They had lived here for a long time, so they had heard a lot about the Wanshur tribe. They knew the style of the tribe. Therefore, the Wanderer's residence was in turmoil. They had lived a good life for 2 years. Were they going to change places again? Pierre and the others also wanted to ask Yanji and other Flaming Horn warriors they were familiar with, but they couldn't find anyone. The Flaming Horn tribe was tense, and the warriors who were patrolling the outermost area also kept their mouths shut, not saying a word. Some wanderers left secretly, but the patrolling warriors didn't stop them. Others saw this and left one after another. But Pierre didn't leave. When someone asked him to leave with them, he refused. He didn't want to leave because he didn't know the specific situation. After waiting for a day, he finally met Yanji and his brother. "Where are you going?" Pierre wanted to ask if the Yinjiao was going to fight with the Wanshur tribe. But now the two brothers didn't look like they were preparing for war. Instead, they seemed to have encountered something good. So he changed his question. "There are some newcomers. We're going over there." Jiao Wu laughed loudly. "Newcomers? Which tribe are they from?" Pierre asked. "Of course they are from the Yinjiao." Pierre thought they were Yinjiao wanderers who were scattered in other places, so he asked casually, "How many have come? Why are you so happy?" Jiao Wu showed 4 fingers to him. 40. Pierre asked tentatively. Jiao Wu looked at him with disdain. 400. Pierre was a little surprised. 400 was a lot. Jiao Wu continued to look at him with disdain. 4. Pierre stuttered. He didn't want to say that number. He thought it was impossible. "Haha, 4,000. I can't talk to you anymore. They're waiting for us." "Wait, are there really 4,000 wanderers?" Pierre asked. "They are not wanderers. They are just like the people in the tribe. I heard they are quite powerful." Speaking of this, Jiao Wu was a little unconvinced. He thought that when those people recovered, he would fight with them. Watching Jiao Wu and his brother leave, Pierre stood there in a daze. Then he patted his head and ran home. Although he didn't understand what Jiao Wu meant, he felt that they were very powerful. Looking at their state today, they didn't seem to be worried about fighting at all. "Go. I won't go even if you kill me. If I don't hug such a thick thigh, where can I find a better one?" As a wanderer, it was rare to encounter such an opportunity. Pierre thought it was good to let those who were wavering leave. He wouldn't go anyway. The flame in the fire pit of the old haunt had been active for a whole night. Warriors were talking and laughing around the bonfire in every corner of the old haunt. Xiao Xian finally came back. Old Ke cooked a big pot of meat soup for him. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Xiao Xian took a shower and had a good night's sleep. He was more tired than the others. He used too much power to support the bone ornaments. Later, he recovered a little and unlocked the sapphire. He led the team all the way here. He was really tired. Xiao Xian slept for 2 days. He didn't wake up halfway, and no one came to wake him up. When Xiao Xian woke up on the 3rd day, there were many new houses in the tribe. Some were built with bricks, some with wood. The clay bricks couldn't be burned so quickly. After all, there were many newcomers, so some people built with wood first. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.